No.
Hi, Yolanda.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm not able to hear you, but do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I don't think they've started talking in the room.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, good morning. And I appreciate the gavel, although it's a pretty tinny sound on the table, but it's all good. So thank you very much for the gavel. And I'd like to welcome everybody to our Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments board meeting for February 9. Appreciate everybody's participation. And our first order of business, this meeting is called to order, and we'd like to establish a quorum. And as we always do, Andy, if you could identify who we have present.
Sure. We'll start with in the room. Thank you, Jess. We have the chair, Commissioner Vanderwerf, Mayor Sharon Thompson from Fountain, Commissioner Eric Stone from Teller County. Trustee, welcome, Trustee Schoening, Darcy Schoening from the town of Monument, sitting in today for Mayor Wilson. Council member Robert Zuluaga, Woodland Park, Mayor Pro Tem Roland Gardine, Callahan, Mayor John Graham, Manitou Springs. I think we've got a quorum just within the room. Those that are online that we see so far, Council member Nancy Hensham, City of Colorado Springs, Council member Yolanda Avila, Colorado Springs, Commissioner Cami Bremer, El Paso County, Commissioner Dick Elsner, Park County. Did we see Commissioner Holly? I do see Commissioner Holly Williams, El Paso County. Anybody else online that we've missed? Okay.
Oh, I think Cami Bremer was mentioned and she
Yep.
is online.
So yes, we need 7, easily have a quorum for today.
Okay, thank you very much. And do we have any introductions for new members? I mean, perhaps it might be Darcy Schoening. Might introduce yourself. I don't know if this is your first PPACG meeting or not, but if it is, we give new people that are here an opportunity. It normally visitors as opposed to a new voting board member. And I know you're just sitting in for Don, but go ahead and introduce yourself so everybody else can get to know you a bit. You push the face with the lines in front of the mouth.
Thank you. My name is Darcy Schoening. I am a trustee in Monument, and I'm glad to be here this morning. I'm sure I'll have a lot of questions, so I'm just going to do my best to listen this morning. Thank you for having me.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have anybody online that's new that we need to do introductions for, or anybody in the audience? Andy, I'll just defer to you. If we're good,
We
we're
do
good.
not. We are expecting a couple of guests that are doing a site visit for our AAA. They do an annual visit. They should be here by 9:30. If they're here in time, we may do just a real brief introduction of the 2 of those staff members when they come down from the state, but they're not here yet. Correct, Jody? Yeah.
Okay, great. And is that Representative Carver's thing, or is that the?
Sorry, Representative Terry Carver, this is separate. She's also planning to call in at some point this morning just to give a brief update on what's happening up at the Capitol. Don't know exactly when that's going to happen. Jessica's hoping to get a text a few minutes before, so we'll let you know, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. And just as a reminder for all the board members and those in the audience, we're always interested in having any member of our delegation, whether that be state or federal, to give them an opportunity to speak to this board from time to time. And the key reason that I'm interested in that is to make sure all of those folks know about us and get to learn maybe a little bit about us as PPACG, but also they can sometimes provide insights about some of the initiatives that they have. It looks like we may have that opportunity with Representative Carver this morning. Okay, so if she does dial in or call in or physically arrive, we'll give her a few minutes to talk, and we'll just stop the agenda on the meeting, give her an opportunity to talk, and thank her for coming, and then we'll move back to the agenda. All right, very good. So our next item is item number 2, which is agenda approval. And I'll open up the floor. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the agenda?
Second, Eric Stone, Teller County.
There is a motion and a second. Any questions from anybody at this point, since we have a valid motion and second? And hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? All right, very good. That passes unanimously. Let's move on to item number 3, public comments and presentations. And did we have anybody from the public send an email in, or do we have anybody in the audience, Andy?
We didn't have anybody from the general public, but Jody Barker, our AAA director, does have a few remarks he wants to convey just on some recent issues around our senior community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barker. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Board of Directors. I wanted to share some information and make sure that you know that we're aware of it and what is happening around that, and to provide some background information. I'm very fortunate to be able to stand here most days and give you positive information. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, we've had some challenging times. And so I will be sharing some information with you today. We are aware of the situation that was shared in the news on Friday evening about the resident who was found outside at 1:30 a.m. in below zero temperatures by the landscapers who came to remove the snow. There is no excuse for those circumstances. We don't know what the circumstances are. We hope to find out more, but at this time, we feel there is no excuse for that, and it's important for us to state that. Our ombudsman program has seen an increase in neglect and abuse cases, as well as a reduction of general care since the beginning of the pandemic. Many of those appear to be from lack of staff. Examples would be individuals not getting bathed for weeks and sometimes months. And I want to repeat that, months. People who need assistance with having their teeth brushed, and other general hygiene issues are told there isn't time or staff to help them. Inedible and cold food, inability to access water due to it not being within reach of bedbound residents, and staff not responding to calls to call lights. This ultimately results in dehydration and emergency room visits. Call lights not being answered for hours and residents laying in their own waste, resulting in loss of dignity and bed sores. Bed sores have increased overall due to lack of hygiene care and rotation. Missing life-saving medications. Resident to resident altercations have increased, and studies show these are normally the lack of engagement and lack of staff to observe and intervene before things escalate. Family and staff stealing residents' belongings and money. Hospitals are discharging to rehab facilities that are understaffed, and the increase of calls regarding standalone rehabs is over 100%. Often families are choosing to take their loved ones home to care for rather than have them continue to languish in a rehab or assisted living situation. Often these cases seem to fall through the cracks of CDPHE, APS, and law enforcement. CDPHE, which is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, appears to be taking a hands-off approach to addressing the lack of staffing in long-term care facilities, stating that they too are short-staffed and behind with their inspections. The lack of enforcement increases the difficulty of our ombudsman, who we house here, as we are not enforcement and yet try to facilitate change through conversations, relationships, and advocacy. One last reminder, most of the long-term care communities in our region, there are 105 long-term care communities in our region, are for-profit entities. We have seen the choice by management to provide the bonuses and increase to stakeholders, and yet put aside the care for the seniors who they are charged to provide care for. Thank you for this opportunity to share. This is challenging situations that we are aware of, that we're continually working on, and through our appropriate channels through the state, and to the federal organizations that we are part of, we continue to advocate for our older adults and residents within El Paso County, Teller, and Park counties. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Are there any questions from the board? Yes, Mr. Zulaga.
Jody, is there a standard set in the elder care facilities for care, treatment, showers, baths, food, et cetera? Are there any standards that we set on a county level or on a state level?
This, thank you for asking that. There are standards of care set by Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, the CDPHE organization. We do not set those at the county nor through this organization.
Do you have, from what you've seen, do you have recommendations?
With all due respect, that might be a long answer.
A yes or no would be okay, just in terms of to share the problem and not have, you know, some window of where we're going.
Absolutely. The challenge is that we don't have enforcement ability nor oversight of the communities or the facilities. Our role in what we have been seeing through our staff and ombudsman program is primarily advocacy on behalf of the residents who live within those long-term care communities. One of the biggest issues appears to be workforce. We're hearing that, as you all are well aware of, workforce issues across all areas of our economy. The biggest challenge is that we have seen that the pandemic has uncovered, as it were, peeled back those layers of the challenges. They've been able to be hid before, but the pandemic has exposed so many areas and so many challenges within our long-term care communities. These examples I read to you are actual examples here in our region, seen by our staff, whose job it is to go in and advocate for those residents. Changing the way at the systemic level, how we approach workforce at the state and national levels for our long-term care communities is crucial.
I appreciate your comments. I'll tell you what, perhaps we could do, and I'll have some comments as well. And it looks like we've got one more hand, but I'll make the recommendation that, oh, it looks like we've got a hand up also online. Thank you, Andy, for pointing that out. Big topic, and perhaps we should agendize this for a future meeting and dig deeper into it. And I think that would be a better way to treat this challenge if y'all are comfortable with that. And Andy, maybe we can kind of do that. And Mr. Barker, I've got others. Well, actually, let me go ahead and let the others. I think Councilwoman Henjum have your hand up, so you'd like to speak. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I would support, making an agenda item about this on a future at a future board meeting. It's profoundly disturbing information, and would ask that as we do that, part of the conversation be what can we potentially as a board do and/or as individual elected officials be doing to be very proactively addressing this challenge. Thank you, Jody, for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you very much for those comments. And I think Mayor Thompson, you had a comment?
I do. I've met a couple of people who lost their jobs at these facilities because they wanted to use the choice on the shot, on the COVID shot. And I would be curious how many of those facilities have been forced to lay people off because of that mandate that came through. These are people who are hardworking citizens within our community and through no fault of their own. Also, I think we need to see about addressing, when my mom was at our home, many of these people work at 3-4 facilities because they only get 10 hours at this facility and 10 hours at that facility. And that has to add to the problem of the staffing issues. But anyways, I would just be curious about the percentage numbers of the various ones where people have been forced to lay off people that were willing and wanting to work.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. I see Commissioner Bremer, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
We see you.
Yes, so thank you. Yeah, Yolanda, for your awareness, we do see you, so you'll be next.
So I am also in favor of having this be a larger and more in-depth action item with, as Councilwoman Hingham said, with specific things that we can do. I think part of that is perhaps going to be having the right people in the room from some of the overarching agencies. So I would love to see if we can have one of our county APS leads in, just so that they can not to stand trial, not to but to know what the conversation is, and the dire. I know they're overworked, and but I feel like the Human Services Department does have a lot of vacancies right now, but they're working hard to kind of fill those and move people around, and if they can be a part of not necessarily the presentation, but present and invited, I would love to see maybe Chris Garvin or someone from our Adult Protective Services from the county here, so that those action items that we talk about can actually get implemented and they hear them firsthand.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that. And I think that's an excellent point, that if we are going to have a more in-depth discussion about this, we do need to bring some other outside experts that can give us some perspectives. And Mayor Thompson just mentioned to me that we probably might need to also consider that this would be maybe a separate workshop, because it might be difficult to put into a board meeting and do it justice. And we might need several hours instead of, a 15-minute typical kind of an approach. So, we'll let the staff mull that over and make a recommendation to the board about how to proceed with something like that. But I think there is a sentiment from the board to have the conversation. We appreciate Mr. Barker bringing that up. And I think Councilwoman Avila also wished to speak. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is disturbing. And like it was pointed out, Jody pointed out that COVID uncovered the disparities that were already going on. So they were already happening, probably not to this degree, but I just want to be careful on blaming, vaccination on that issue, since it was already there. But I think in the letters that we wrote for the greenhouses and how we're just, appalled and want to make sure that, the state knows how we feel about it. And it seemed like we could go to a letter writing campaign as well. And I just think that a month away is a death sentence for many people in those homes. So I think we really need to act with urgency. And this is something as a board we can do. I mean, that could be any of us in 10, 20 years. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much. And are there any other comments from any of the board members, either in the room here or online? And I don't see any at the moment, but I'm sorry, Mr. Stone.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I agree with Councilwoman Avila's comments, in that I think it's certainly appropriate for this body to author and send a letter of concern to the agencies which do have oversight over this industry, and then for us to then look at delving into it locally, here as well. So I would certainly be more than willing to authorize the chair and staff to author a letter of concern. I don't want to say a letter of outrage, because we have to be civil in the world, but we certainly are all outraged by not only the specific events that were mentioned, but just the overall condition that we're in. So I would be perfectly okay with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for whatever it's worth, part of the reason why we get together is because we're a stronger voice when we're together, but so many of us who are elected officials sit on so many other boards that can also potentially have a measure of influence. And I'll just bring to light, but just as a reminder, Commissioner Bremer sits on the local Board of Health board, and the governor just recently appointed me to the state Board of Health. So you actually have a voice, and the key to that is, if we're interested in asking for conversations in health boards, as a voting member of the state Board of Health, for example, I can ask for that to be brought forward as an agenda item, and maybe even have some people from our community come up and testify in that meeting. So there's a whole range of possibilities that are possible here. And what that would mean is, I think when we do our workshop, we think about, what do we think would be the right kinds of courses of action, and then use our resources to maybe pursue those courses of action. And I'll also make one other point. Now, it's something that is a personal item for me. So my mom, who lives in New Jersey, has similar kinds of challenges at this point. And that particular county in New Jersey offers a very interesting service that I think is great. I mentioned it to the county staff, but I'll mention it here. But we can maybe add it as a discussion point, and there'll probably be a ton of other ideas. So what they do there is they have an automated telephone service where anybody who doesn't otherwise have constant care all day long or through many hours a day automatically receives a phone call from this automated service. And then they answer that phone, and there's a recording. It's all automated. And the recording is, if everything is good, press 1. And if you have a problem, press 2. Or if they don't get a response, then they call back again 10 minutes later. And if they don't get a response the second time, then they send an ambulance or some type of healthcare service or something to check in on the person. Now, it's kind of like only one point in the course of a day. But, when you think about it, if you're an elderly person, you're in your house, you're going to go to the bathroom, you fall, you break your hip. It is better to know that within 24 hours, somebody's going to be calling and you're not going to be answering, and someone's going to come, than to maybe have them there for a long period of time, in which case you might have even worse outcomes, right? Now, I have no clue if that's expensive or not. I have no clue if there's a terrible liability issue connected to that or not. But I'm going to just offer it up as an idea, as a potential kind of set of concepts that we can have a conversation about. And we have representatives with, many of the public agencies in the community here. And maybe there is a thing or two that we could come up with as ideas, and then go to the different public agencies in our community and start having conversations about it. And who knows what that'll produce? Might produce some good outcomes that will, we'll never entirely solve this, but maybe we can take a step or two that gets us in a little bit better place. So I'll just offer that up. I found that that program in my mom's county to be really, really interesting. And I can tell you, my mom loves it because she gets a phone call every day. It's automated, doesn't get to speak to somebody, but it gives her reassurance as well. So just an idea kind of thing.
Thank you. And based on one of our previous conversations between you and I, Mr. Chair, I have been digging into that program specifically, as
Excellent.
well as others across the nation. So
That's right. We did talk about it
Thank
earlier.
you for bringing that up, and do know that is in process to get some
to do an
background.
evaluation and
Yes, sir.
learn
Yes.
about
Mhm.
something like that. Excellent.
Some
That's
of
super.
the seniors down in the Fountain Valley area, they actually have their own individual phone trees they've set up. That this one calls this one and this one, every day.
Oh, I love
So,
it.
I would encourage you,
They call
rather
each
than wait
other.
for the government, set up a tree with your friends, right? And to take care of it today.
I love it.
So-
That's great. Okay, so let's we'll ask the
Sure.
staff to have a conversation about how do we have a deeper conversation about this. We'll let you tell us what you think would be the right answer. And we'll go with that. Are there any last questions on this topic?
Mr. Chair, I'll
Yes.
suggest we're going to try to set something up, I think, fairly soon. I don't want to overcommit us, but maybe ideally by the end of February. I mean, there is a sense of urgency here, just given that our seniors in long-term care are still dealing with these issues. So I think the sooner we can get on this, the better. So we'll aim for doing something by the end of February. Plus, we have our meeting with our legislative members on March 4th with our legislative roundtable up in Denver. So I think it'd be important to kind of get our arms around some of this before that conversation as well. So we'll flesh out some details here, and we'll be back in touch.
Okay, very good.
And thank you for the opportunity. Our guests are here
Yeah.
before our 9:30 meeting, if I may, for just a moment. We have You can stand. As Andy mentioned, we are currently going through our AAA State Unit on Aging State Program Audit, or Program Assessment, as they like to call it. And so we have Karen Klein here, who is the state evaluator down here from the State Unit on Aging. And a new member of the State Unit on Aging staff is Jillian Winborn. So she's shadowing over the next few days. And so we started this actually last week, and the snowstorm put a crimp in our plans. And so they've come back to wrap up. So they'll be visiting with us this morning. And so I'll disappear here shortly to be part of that. And then we'll visit with two more programs in our region this afternoon and tomorrow. We've already met with three other providers as part of our annual state assessment. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share this. We felt it was important since this just happened last week and was in the news on Friday. We felt it very important for the board to know that we're well aware of this and the challenges that are being faced by the residents of our long-term care communities, and that we are doing all we can, and we so appreciate your support, and we'll get to work on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the team. Are you all down from Denver? Okay, great. So you might be well aware, maybe you know a lot about what PPACG does. Okay, I see some head nods up and down. So, and you might be aware of Dr. Cog and who they are. So we're the Dr. Cog of the Pikes Peak region.
They're the PPACG of the Denver region. Yes.
Okay, see, now I like that even better. So they are the PPACG of the Denver region. Okay, so that's Dr. Cog. All right, thank you very much. Oh my goodness, I didn't know I would get so much criticism for that comment. So, all right, very good. Thank you for coming. Is there anybody else in the audience or online that wishes to provide public comment? All right, seeing none, let's move on to item number 4. And these are our consent items. And this is approval of the minutes for the January 12, 2022 regular meeting and the summary of financials. Are there any comments or questions from any of the board members regarding these two items? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
And Jim, so move.
All right, Councilwoman Hingham is the motion, and do we have a second?
So I'll second John Graham.
Thank you very much. All right, any last questions or comments from any of the board members? All right, hearing none, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Let's move on to item number 5. And the first one is the Front Range Passenger Rail District Representative Appointment. And Andy, if I could hand that over to you.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a little bit of background. First of all, we talked about this quite a bit at the workshop on Friday and a little bit at last month's meeting as well. But we're able to appoint, the board is able to appoint one person to represent the region on the Front Range Passenger Rail District. The city of Colorado Springs will also get an appointment to that district. It was formed under Senate Bill 238 that was passed last year, and will really take the place of the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission that has been in existence since 2017, I believe. The board will consist of about 17 members. We understand that initial terms will roughly be a two-year term to start. Most likely the district board will meet on the 4th Friday of every month, but that's yet to be determined by the new members that are appointed. First meeting is projected to be May 15th, coming up here in just a couple of months. Now, the appointment and voting on who can be appointed is going to be restricted to those within the MPO boundaries within El Paso County. So that does narrow the range of potential folks who can represent the region, and those actually on the board that can vote to who can be appointed. I appreciate Spencer Dodge, who's on the line today, pointing that out at our Friday meeting, and I did find that as well in Senate Bill 238. So those jurisdictions where a representative could come from, and those jurisdictions for where folks today can vote are limited to, and I've got the jurisdictions listed here, Palmer Lake, Monument, Manitou Springs, Colorado Springs, Fountain, Green Mountain Falls, and El Paso County. So those are the jurisdictions within our MPO boundaries within El Paso County. After the workshop meeting on Friday, I put out a request to see who was interested in throwing their hat in the ring for consideration. And I heard back from 3 members, Mayor John Graham, Councilmember Dave Donaldson, and Mayor Sharon Thompson. So those are the 3 that have expressed interest so far. What we've talked about, Mr. Chair, is perhaps doing kind of secret ballots, if you will. I know there are a couple of sticky notes in front of each member's spot, but those are restricted again to those jurisdictions that I just mentioned that are part of the MPO within El Paso County. Those online, I think what we've suggested is that if they could text me what their preference is as far as when we open up the voting, I think that would be a good way of handling this, and I can help to tally the votes. Jess, speak and put my cell phone number in the chat, and feel free to text me if you're one of our member jurisdictions within the MPO area.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I will also mention Commissioner Bremer made a suggestion to me in a phone call on the way over here this morning that maybe we could get a member designated as our representative, but then maybe also have an alternate. And so what I'd like to do is maybe ask, the first question I'd like to ask is just to make sure that that isn't some kind of procedural problem with the Rail Commission, if we can do that.
Our understanding, and Spencer can maybe chime in, is that they haven't decided yet on alternates. It's probably okay that we be prospective and kind of lean forward a little bit, but I see Spencer on the line. Do you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, thank you. So Senate Bill 238 doesn't say you can or cannot. So I would recommend going ahead and being proactive with that action and appointing a kind of an alternate. That determination will be decided though by the new board of directors once they're seated and have a chance to go through their chartering and their bylaws effort to kind of kick off the district. So whether that ends up being the case or not, I'm not sure, but I would recommend going ahead and doing that today.
Okay, I think that sounds reasonable to me, and perhaps when that board does form and they deliberate over that topic, we could maybe encourage them to do that, because we're all elected officials. We have very busy lives, and there just simply are going to be a few meetings where representatives from wherever they are not going to be able to make it, and having an alternate, I think, would be a reasonable request. So when they get to that point, maybe we can make that ask. And then I also see online here, and I think it is from Nancy Henjum, you'd be interested in hearing a little bit from each of the folks that are running. And is the sentiment of the board feel the same about that? Maybe just a little bit of conversation, minute or so. We're actually all friends here, and so there isn't really an enormous amount that you necessarily have to say, but maybe we give everybody an opportunity. Now, Mr. Donaldson is not here and he's interested. He did send me a text this morning, so with your permission, I'll just read that text, and that will have to serve as his comments if there's no objection to that. All right, yes, go ahead.
Commissioner Vanderwerf, I just have a question. If we move forward with an alternate as well, then would whoever comes in second, could we make them the alternate so that this is done here and then?
Appreciate the point. Well, we do have a little bit of a procedure on how we get to a representative and an alternate, and we could either do it that way, and that might be the best way. Another way would be maybe to say who you want as your prime and who you want as your alternate, but maybe, I don't know, what does everybody else feel about that? Yeah, I think Commissioner Bremer, you've got your hand up.
I was just going to ask if any of those who have said they are interested would like to just go ahead and say that you're okay just being on the alternate list.
Okay, let's make that offer. I
Chairman,
think,
can you clarify that? Do you want us to say we only want to be the alternate, or we're fine with being the alternate if we don't win the primary?
Yeah, if anybody just kind of was okay with being the alternate from the beginning, and that changes who's really vying for
Got it. Okay.
the voting seat.
yes, Mr. Graham.
Yeah, it's John Graham, Manitou Springs. I would be willing to serve in either capacity.
Okay,
I'm willing to serve in either, but of course we prefer the primary.
okay. So, we've got type A personalities, and they're all interested in being the representative, but they're all willing to serve as the alternate as well. So I think that's where we're at.
Sounds good.
All right, very good. So if there's no objection, maybe we give everybody an opportunity to speak for a minute. If you guys are comfortable with this, I'll close with the short comments for Mr. Donaldson. They're very short. It'll take me only 15 seconds to give his. But maybe we could start with Mr. Graham. And I don't think we need to set a time limit, but we're not looking for long speeches. So.
Well, I prepared a 45-minute speech, so I'm crestfallen, Mr. Chair. Actually, just real quick, I grew up here, grew up in Manitou Springs and in the west side of Colorado Springs. And in over 68 years, I've seen this area just grow tremendously. Every time I get onto I-25, to run to Denver, I'm just struck by how much growth we've had and how heavily traveled the roads are. I remember going back, when I was in college, it was really a fairly easy drive. Now it's, somewhat challenging. So I think transportation is a huge concern. I do see the Front Range rail system as one way to alleviate some of the traffic. I realize it's a long-term commitment. I think a long-term vision is required from elected officials. So I guess that would be my kind of a guiding principle. I do think I would be very interested in representing the region as a whole. This is it's a shared problem, I think, from Trinidad clear up to Cheyenne, if when it comes down to it. So that's my hopefully brief remarks.
Thank you. I thought those were brief, so those are good. All right, Mayor Thompson.
I think mine are even briefer. I know I has spoken out consistently against my concerns with the tax on this. However, if this does pass, that changes your position. You are in the driver's seat of needing to be on this. I believe that I agree with Mayor Graham that it is a regional issue and needs a regional approach. But a lot of the smaller communities that go directly through our region here, especially the city of Fountain, are going to be greatly affected by the amount of trains. They've told us up to potentially 14 round trip trains going through our communities per day. I believe that I would be a good person to represent us, to be on the planning and development stage of that at the beginning, because I will represent very strongly the small cities and how this is going to greatly affect us and some of the needs that might be unique to having all those trains go through, because they could affect the greenhouse gas emissions in our city, the equity of our quality of life issues, and various things very directly. So that's why I'd like to represent it. And, even if they use the train to get to Denver, they still got to get home in the evening, and they don't want to spend an extra 30 minutes sitting there while the trains are going through their community. So, and I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm known for my question of where is that going to come from? Great idea, but where's the money going to come from, and how are we going to pay for it?
Great, thank you very much. And I'll go ahead and make my comments on behalf of Dave Donaldson, assuming there's no objection from any members of the board. So he's unable to be here today. He had to travel east for a family challenge. I think it's a healthcare challenge in his family. So we need to wish him well. And he wants to express his apologies for not being here today, but he is still interested in the position. And he believes that he would provide a good balance to the board. He also mentions, of course, my phone turned off right at that moment, right? Isn't that the way it works? And if elected, he is running for legislature. So if he's elected to the legislature, he would continue to serve in this capacity if the PPACG board would be willing to let him do so. So those are actually the extent of his remarks. So he's still interested, and he expressed his apologies that he was unable to be here physically, but he had a family issue he had to deal with. Okay, so I think those are the conversations from the three. I see online, Andy, I think that's you, you've got your number there for people who are online and who are eligible voting members to be able to send to you via text. At this point in time, is everybody ready to proceed forward with the vote? Are there any comments or questions before we do that? And Andy, you have a comment? Oh, we do have a couple hands up. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
please.
This is Nancy Henjum, council member from Colorado Springs District 5. And I would just like for the board to consider upon their vote that given that we have already one resident member of the city, if you will, essentially representing the city, appointed by the mayor, that I would encourage us to look at the two other candidates from just a geographical and regional perspective. That would be my only comment before we vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. It is, I think it's excellent to just have that in mind when we consider who we vote for, because we do have a representative from the city, and I believe that is Jill Gabler. Is that correct? Okay, see,
Yes, that is correct. And by the way, it's good news why Dave is gone. He's actually celebrating the retirement of his brother from the police force after 30 years, and I think in North Carolina. I'm not sure.
Oh,
but
thank you. So I
it's-
had a little mischaracterization. I thought it was a health issue, but it's actually a celebration.
Yes,
His
yeah.
brother's retirement from a police force. That's
He's
awesome.
a police officer. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, and is there another hand up? I think there was one. Commissioner Bremer, did you have your hand up? Are you good?
I just typed into the chat, if someone could type out the names for us, for those of us who will be sending Andy texts.
Okay, great. Thank you. So if we could have those names, oh, you got them. Okay. So Dave Donaldson, John Graham, and Sharon Thompson. And, you know, I'm sure in any manner in which you wish to express, let's see, how do we want to do this? Do you vote for two, or do you vote for one for rep and one for alternate?
I've gotten
maybe?
a couple of texts already, and I think this is working where if you can put forward who your primary is and then who your alternate, preferred alternate would be, I think that would work.
Okay.
And then we have 4 in the room, the 2 of you, 2 over here, that should fill out your sticky notes, and we can collect those and I'll tally them up with the text votes that are coming in.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So everybody, please proceed with your voting. And then if we could have someone, looks like we do have someone coming around to collect the votes. Excellent. Yeah, do we have a? We could go all the way to formal and do a teller committee, but I think we're amongst friends here. I don't think we need to go quite that far. Yeah, I know you were, so it's.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm going to run out of fingers and toes.
And while the votes are being tallied up, I just want to express my appreciation to those that are interested. You know, normally it's, and maybe this is for Darcy's benefit, most of the time we usually end up with a single person interested in sitting on a committee, and we never have to do this. We just do it by acclamation. But having several interested in this position, I think, is great. So it's really wonderful. We do. Okay, I'll tell you what, with everybody's permission, why don't we just go ahead and, unless you're ready. Okay, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. I think a few folks need to take a restroom break and so forth, and we'll give an opportunity for the staff to tally up the votes. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if we could come back to the meeting, please.
Okay, okay, good.
Thank you. Okay. Right. I've got it. I appreciate it. So, so we do have a winner, and I tell you, that's really great because it's always a pain if there's a tie and you have to figure out additional things to follow up with. But we would like to congratulate John Graham as having been voted as our primary, and also to congratulate Sharon Thompson as our alternate. So thank you, everybody, for your voting, and we appreciate the work that you're going to be doing on that board. Do you want to do an acceptance speech, John? It looks like you wanted to speak for a second. So
I was going to congratulate Mayor Thompson and look forward to working on the committee and working with you, Sharon. I understand your concerns about the, extra traffic, rail traffic in your community. So that's to be taken seriously. Thank you.
great. Thank you very much. Being the great lead already there, John, is making sure you take everybody's issues up to that board. And I think that's very important. And I know you'll represent us well. So thank everybody for that. With your, yes, Mr. Liasados.
Okay, didn't realize we need a resolution. Let's, I guess by motion and a second and a vote, that would be.
Okay. So we have a recommendation to vote on a resolution appointing John as our primary and Sharon as our alternate. And of course, I think that resolution still needs to be written, but we could give the staff that discretion to go ahead and do that. So I'll entertain a motion to approve that resolution and a second for that.
Just a point of clarification.
Please.
Are the only people voting on this resolution the entities involved or the whole board?
Just the communities within the MPO in the county. Yes.
All right. And we don't need a secret ballot for this one, I don't think. So, all right. Do we have a motion?
Yolanda, move to approve.
And a second?
Second. Commissioner
We have a
Bremer.
motion. Thank you very much. It's Commissioner Bremer for the second. So we have a motion and a second. I don't think we need any further conversation because we know the topic. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, so just to meet the requirement, if you needed a motion and a vote, you now have it, Andy, so thank you very much. Let's move on to item number 5B, the annual traffic safety target setting. And John Liasados, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I see we have Darius on the line, and hopefully we also have Dave from Cdot on the line as well. So for those of you who are new to the PPACG board, there is a federal requirement for states to establish performance measures and safety targets on an annual basis. 90 days after the state selects their targets, all the MPOs need to either adopt and support the state targets, or they need to go by themselves and have and establish their own safety targets. In the past, when we've done this year after year, I've always stood up here and said, look, this is all risk, no reward. If you go by yourself, there are things that can be sort of negative, where it still counts against the state. It locks in certain choices and takes the choice away from you, and it moves it over to the feds, kind of forcing that. While if we go in with the state, we're far better off, leaves more options. And I know when it comes to safety, nobody wants to say anything is, any number is acceptable. But again, this is just, again, a federal exercise, not sort of what we stand up and actually say. I think when we all stand up, we support Drive Smart Colorado, we support safe streets, we want 0 fatalities. But for this statistical exercise at the federal level, staff is recommending that we adopt the state targets and support them. Moving forward with the new IIJA, which I like to lovingly call the Ouija Board Act, the Infrastructure Improvement Jobs Act, there may be a reason next year, because of different funding that's available, we might want to go it alone. But for this year, our recommendation is definitely to go ahead and adopt the state targets and support them. When we had both the CAC meeting and the board workshop, a couple of questions came up. Someone wanted to explain the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries category. Danielle did text David from Cdot in advance, and we got the response that it reflects the numbers of serious injuries and fatalities to pedestrians and bicycles when they're involved in collisions with motor vehicles. The other question we have was, when you look at the data that was included in your packet, can you explain the cause and the jump of serious injuries in 2018? David responded that there really isn't a definitive explanation that they've been able to discern. Could be related to the data collection and reporting, but it could be, but it's not typically restrained to a single year, such as this, as they're outliers. So they're still sort of trying to decipher that. So trying to keep my comments short, gonna leave it open, so that way if you have got questions, we can delve deeper on stuff. But for those of you who are comfortable moving forward, you don't need to hear me built on for another 10 minutes telling you things you already know or are comfortable with. And again, we've got David and Darius on the line, who are the real experts from Cdot that can tell you why they, what numbers they got and how they got the numbers, if you're interested. But then again, in the interest of time, we'll open it up to the desires of the board.
Okay, wonderful. Are there any questions? Looks like we got, okay. Councilwoman Avila, you have your hand up, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. It may have been in the packet, I'm not sure, but did we meet the targets last year in 21? Did the state meet the state targets?
Darius and David, do you want to respond?
Go ahead, Darius.
No. So we are, because of the way that the data is
the review process is kind of delayed a little bit. So we just got what they call significant progress, or meeting the targets, on 19, because usually the data isn't final until 1 year after the close of the reporting year. The 19 targets, we did not meet what they call significant progress. In order to do that, you need to meet targets on at least 4 of the 5. We only met on 3 of that year. And so therefore, a couple of things happen with that. We have to, the state has to write a response on what they're going to do to meet the targets next year in what's called the Highway Safety Improvement Program report. They have to obligate all of their funds for as part of the HSIP program to safety projects, which not a big deal because we already use all of our funds for safety, all those funds for safety projects anyway. They are a little bit flexible. Other states do it for other things. Cdot does not do that. So that's kind of the consequences of not meeting it. As far as what will happen in 20 and 21, we will see significant progress determination whether we met the targets in 20 this year. I don't think that's happened yet, and then 21 next year. So you're looking at a little bit of delay as the data is recorded and finalized. So hopefully I covered all that, Dave, unless you wanted to add anything else.
No, I think the target evaluation occurs like in April, typically every year. So we'll know in a couple months how we did for 2020. Although just looking at the preliminary numbers, I don't think we've again met the targets. Not all of them. I think we're short on a couple, so we might fall short again for this next round.
And if you will, I might add a couple of things. There's a couple of charts in the package that have some interesting information as well. And these statistics are Colorado wide. And I believe they have a multi-year statistics, so you can see the trends. So Colorado fatalities, Colorado wide, did go up in 2020, which reversed a 2-year trend of going down in the previous years. Having said that, though, on the serious injuries chart, the number of serious injuries went substantively down. So we basically have a mixed bag of some things that have increased and some things that have decreased. And when you look at the third chart, which is 2020 crashes compared to 2019, there's 12 statistics and 6 of them went up and 6 of them went down. So you can take a look at those numbers, and it's a mixed bag. But if there's something to ascertain from the data, it seems like fatalities went up and serious crashes went down. So, that's kind of maybe something to ascertain from the charts. Go ahead, Mayor Thompson.
I have a question on the chart that has to do with fatalities, and they're horrible numbers in any way. So I don't want this question to infer that I don't think that that's a horrible situation. But if we look at the statistics from 2011 to 2020, there's a very large population growth increase in our community. So is there any formula or way to compare that with the population growth as compared to the crash increases? Because if your population is greatly increasing, the number of crashes is seemingly going to increase. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, if the data is normalized by
Normalized.
average population or by roadway miles or vehicle miles traveled. So Darius, Dave, can you help answer that? Do you need to know which chart she's talking about? But otherwise, the general question, how do you take the numbers and normalize them so you can compare apples to apples? Is it by population, road miles, or vehicle miles traveled?
I could take this one. It is by vehicle miles traveled. When you see the fatality rate there and the serious injury rate, that's based off of 100 million mile vehicles traveled. So that helps normalize and account for population growth, travel growth. And it's interesting in 2020 mentioning that the fatalities went up, but the VMT, the vehicle miles travel, went way down because of the lockdown from the pandemic. So we saw a huge jump in the fatality rate for that year. But yeah, fatalities have been trending up in the last few years, where prior to the pandemic, we saw a steady decrease. So that all of that factors into how we set these targets for 2022.
Great, thank you. And for whatever it's worth, on the charts that are in the packet, they don't necessarily have a legend that tells you whether or not the numbers are absolute or normalized. So maybe we can just always have that caveat in there, because I can't tell from the chart. So since the legend is not there, I would have assumed that those are absolute numbers. So, and I think therein lies the reason why Mayor Thompson asked the question. And yeah, and then on the third chart, which is a comparison of the 2020 crashes compared to 2019, the two bottom numbers, urban fatalities went up 10%, but rural fatalities went down 4%. So there may be some interesting insights that could be accrued from some of this data that might be interesting or useful to us. So just saying, there's a mixed bag of numbers. Any other questions on this particular topic? And this is a voting topic, and what we need to vote on is whether or not we approve supporting the Cdot safety targets. And I don't think the safety targets are El Paso County or El Paso County, Park County, and Teller County individually. This is the statewide, right? They're looking for our support for these targets.
That's my understanding, but I'll make sure with Darius and David that that is in fact the case, that we are supporting the statewide numbers, which is everything in the state. Is that correct, Darius and David?
Correct. Yeah, all roads in the state. That's what those targets for. And I should mention that I don't think we mentioned that these targets are on 5-year averages as well. So you're looking at 17 through 22, I believe, the average per year for for those 5 measures.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And the third chart that I was referring to a couple of times is now on the screen, so you can see that the items in red are increases, the items in green are decreases, and it's a mixed bag. So, okay, thank you. So we do have we do have to decide whether we approve this or support it, I should say, and or not support it. So are there any other questions at this point? Yes, Mayor Thompson.
The proposed motion in the packet says targets for calendar year 2021.
And they do say that.
Are we?
It says CDOT's safety targets for calendar year 2021.
Page
So
11.
yeah,
Is that a typo?
I don't, yeah, Darius, David, can you help me out here? I'm unclear as to if we're, since you guys already did yours, if we're supporting what you did in there, or does that need to be revised to 22?
I think it needs to be 22.
Yeah.
Our apologies. I think we might have taken the last year's memo and we didn't quite update that. So
I'll just
my
simply
apologies.
say great catch. Wow,
Yes.
good. Yeah.
I'm still writing 2019 on my checks, so.
Understand. Okay, with that clarified, I move to approve supporting CDOT's safety targets for the calendar year of 2022.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second from Nancy Hinton.
Okay, Nancy Henjum is the second. And any last comments or questions from anybody? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? And there's no opposed, so those are approved. And before we go on to the next agenda item, I'll just mention, I see our Transportation Commissioner, Lisa Hickey, has said congratulations to our primary and our alternate for the Front Range Rail Commission. So in case you hadn't had a chance to see that yet, she is congratulating our two folks that just got voted in. All right, very good. Let us move now to item 5C, which is the CDOT 10-year plan. And please proceed.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'll see if we can't do this in sort of an expedited fashion. However, obviously, if I go too fast, feel free to just stop and say you have questions. We do have several members of Cdot on the call to help out with some of the questions, especially if you want to dive into some of the specific project details. I believe Shane Ferguson's on the call for that. So years ago, before I got here, the practice had been started to develop a 10-year list of projects within the region. The long-range plan that we do here in the region is sort of the, identifies all of the funding that we have, all of the different challenges, and gives a list of projects. From that, we draw from that list to get into our TIP, our Transportation Improvement Program, of the projects we're actually going to do. One slight difference in the statewide plan is that the feds do not require it to have a list of projects. So normally a state plan, and again, this was true when I was in Arizona, the statewide plan usually just talks about policies and objectives and those sorts of things in more of a loose term, but doesn't require an actual list. So for lack of a better term, this 10-year plan has over time acted as that project list for a long-range plan sort of thing on the state level. It's what we're going to do at the state with our particular funding allocations in agreement with Cdot over time. So the priority list is just that. It's a priority list. From that list, projects will be pulled and then actually then put into the TIP to get funded. So what we're asking today is that you look at the priority list, and Jess, I don't know if you can scroll up a little bit to get to the list. There we go, perfect. What we're asking today is for you to adopt this list. You did get to see it last month, so hopefully there's no surprise here, and we're going to be good to move forward. By adopting this list today, you're not saying that any of these projects are actually going to can move forward without your approval. You're saying these are your priorities. Now, in my very next breath, I will now tell you that once you adopt this today, knock wood, that's you're going to be comfortable with that. Next month, you will see some of these projects, again, your higher priorities, come back to you in the form of a TIP amendment. That then moves from a sort of a, this is our priority, to we're actually committing to this project, we're putting dollars to it, and we're going to actually start seeing different phases of it. Some of these you'll see maybe a right-of-way phase or a design phase, or even actually a construction phase if it's far enough along. So again, what we're asking today is to approve these priorities. And next month, you will see some of these projects actually come back in the form of a TIP amendment. That will be a discussion at our TAC committee. I saw we had a couple of the folks from our TAC on the call here. So they're the ones that are going to do the heavy lifting and sort of go through and make sure that the region is concurrence with the Cdot sort of way forward. But that's going to come later. So that's the question in front of you today. Again, we've got Shane, if you want to ask any particular questions about any of the projects on the list. And let me double check. This is the same list that they saw last time. So this is the same list you saw last time. Now, when I get to the transit list, there's been a change, but this is exactly what you saw last month. So with that, I think I've rambled on long enough. Does anyone have any questions of me at the 50,000 foot level, or any questions for Shane about specific projects?
Yes, Mayor
I'm a
Thompson,
little
go ahead.
I'm a little confused. So you
Oh.
put this in front of us today. So I've been sitting here
Yeah.
studying this.
I'm sorry, that the list that was put in front of you today, there's always somebody that reads ahead, is the transit list. And
I don't think that is the topic at this point.
Right,
Well,
that
see,
is-
that's
that
where
is
I
the-
got confused.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
that
I
is my
thought
next-
this
and my
I
apologies.
thought this list was superseding the list in the packet.
this list that you were given today, if you're here in person, is that there was a change discussed by MMT and Cdot on the transit development list. So I was going to finish the roadway list, which didn't change, and then I was going to do that. So my apologies for that. So the roadway list is what we want to sort of chat about first, and then I'll move to the transit list.
So I'll just maybe start the conversation. It's a little bit of a follow-up from our conversation on Friday, and maybe just to kind of set a good perspective for that list. So the items on the top, if you have it in color, they're in the yellow background. Otherwise, they're just the 4 on the top of the list, are funded, and 3 of which are under construction, and the 4th one is going to start this summer. And that is great. Those are great projects, and I'm thrilled that they are funded. But then you go down below that and we get to item number 5 and continuing downward. So it is kind of important for us to really be comfortable with what would be the next one we would fund? We would ask Cdot to fund if we could. And you see the list as it is presently, and that every one of these projects is important. So it's kind of difficult to, have a conversation that we need to move one over another or something, but we can do that. That is something we can do. And I can tell you when we had the meeting on Friday, I looked at item number 8, I believe it was. No, I'm sorry, item number, where is it? Yeah, it's item number 8, which is US 24 West over Ridge Road, and that's an overpass. Now, what that is kind of the first stage of Highway 24 going up Ute Pass and getting to grade separation, because the traffic backup from Woodland Park and Manitou Springs going into Colorado Springs and vice versa when you're leaving at the end of the day is massive crowds of cars, massive. So I had this question, why in the world are we starting with Ridge Road, which is probably the road that has the least amount of traffic going across Highway 24 in comparison to the other intersections, which have a lot of traffic? And I got an answer, and maybe I can ask that answer be provided again, because it's some of the conversation, but this is illustrative or simply an example of what we can talk about on this list. So it looks like Mr. Zamora, you're going to take a shot at providing that answer.
Yeah, and so, Shane, feel free to jump in, at some point if I misstate anything, but in general, number one, we have a fiscal constraint. So it's an amount of money that we can actually afford to be able to put into the plan to address some of those things and start working on it. And the other important thing about this project that I'll note is, this is right across from the park, right there. And so the parking actually at that park is inadequate. And so we have a lot of people actually parking across Highway 24 and essentially playing Frogger. I'm trying to get across 24. So we do have some pedestrian incidents, that are very concerning to us. And so building this overpass would allow better access by peds and bikes to be able to get into the park in that area. So,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not just incidents, it's also some people getting killed.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So that was kind of an interesting answer that I heard that I had not thought about. But anyway, that's the kind of conversations we can have. Now, I think we have 2 hands raised, and we'll start with the one that was raised first. So Councilwoman Hingham, I think you had your hand raised. So please go ahead, and then we'll have Commissioner Stone.
Yeah, thank you for that detail. It's interesting. And it sounds like sometimes it's just a matter of what money is left that you have to do the less expensive projects. But I guess my, and I'm sorry if I should know the answer to this question, but I don't, which is who, I certainly would have opinions, but I'm not an expert in this field. And I guess my question is who does work on the prioritization? And clearly this happens over a number of years with a lot of different factors in mind. So if you could just help me understand how we get to this prioritized list for our conversations.
So John, you might be able to, jump on this as well, but it really is truly a partnership. Cdot has their ideas, PPACG and the member agencies have their ideas. We come together in a conversation and arrive at, these are the best priorities going forward, given the fiscal constraint that we have to live within. And so, what happens through the technical advisory committee or the transportation advisory committee is largely where a lot of that conversation takes place.
And if I might expand on that answer, first, there's a couple of steps that have to happen where projects get identified is usually during corridor studies or other sorts of regional studies where they sort of say, hey, we've got this issue, what's the best way to do it? And they'll come back and say, well, we need to move this road, or we need to increase the lanes on this road, or we need to move the geometry as such, right? All of the sort of different solutions come forward from these different studies. And then that sort of percolates up into then the different sorts of plans that we have. And most importantly is the long-range transportation plan. We cannot do any plan, we can't fund anything in the TIP unless it is in or consistent with the long-range plan. So there's kind of years building up to a project finally getting identified. The 10-year plan list, for the most part, not always, but have already been included in other things. And a lot of these projects already have some sort of environmental clearance or have been included in some sort of NEPA level document that say, yes, this is a real project and this is something we can move forward. We don't want to put something on a list that says, hey, we're going to do a ski lift up the Pikes Peak to move people, because that's pure, that's not anything that's based in fact, and we've got any sort of study and real numbers behind, right? So before it can get to this stage, there's years, literally years and different studies that go into identifying the projects. As it moves forward, like Rich has said, we do a comprehensive, a cooperative and continuous planning exercise with Cdot. We can't force Cdot to do any project that they're not willing and able to do, but conversely, Cdot can't come in and build any project they want without our permission. It's this iterative process where we sort of have a give and take of what our priorities are and what they and what the funding is available to us. So that's where we get sort of the candidate projects. And then the folks on the TAC committee, which I've mentioned before, folks like Brandy Williams and Victoria Chavez and others, then they really work on that nuts and bolts sort of thing, saying, hey, this is what we're looking at. And that's why you saw a lot of changes from sort of that initial list from 2 months ago to the list that you see in front of you today. So again, we're really lucky to have a great relationship with our Cdot district. We tend to make sure that we're doing things that make sense, and given the data that we have, provides the most bang for the buck. So does that answer the question?
It does, John, and I appreciate it very much. And I generally want to really trust all of the folks who are doing tons of work on this before I would weigh in. And I guess I would also imagine and really look to you as the as subject matter expert on with the Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments too, that you would bring things to our attention that you thought we needed to know about.
Yep, thank you. And that's why we try to do this as a long process to make sure we flesh out all the questions. Like Commissioner Vanderwerf says, all of these things are up for discussion.
Right.
Okay.
At this point, hopefully we've already had most of that discussion, because there is a time limit on this and we would like to get into that today.
Right.
Yeah, good.
And Commissioner
Okay.
Stone, you had your,
Okay.
thank you. Commissioner Stone, you had your hand raised as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this Ridge Road issue, it's important to remember also when you look at the seasonal traffic patterns that occur on Highway 24, as people are returning from the mountains, as Highway 24, the only corridor, and traffic begins to back up off of Cimarron, is people are looking for bail opportunities, how to get off 24. That really begins to happen at 31st Street. And then as it backs up from there, because of the signaling and they've expanded the left turn lane and the last major enhancement to 31, but it's still, there's a loading of cars that goes all the way back up past that hill. And as soon as the people see the cars backed up from 31st, they begin to turn left onto Ridge Road off of Highway 24, which is an uncontrolled intersection. That's causing accidents, conflicts there, in addition to the pedestrian issues that were already mentioned. And I think their solution to this was either A, go in and signalize that interchange, which obviously then causes more backups. And now we're pushing back up into Manitou Springs. But by doing a flyover like what they're proposing there, is you would get an exit lane for those wanting to go off on Ridge Road, but it continues a flow of traffic along Highway 24, which I would assume is CDOT's goal here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll make a point of, if you kind of nug your way through this list, you'll see basically that there's several things on here that are priorities, but you see several projects that relate to grade separation on 24 west of I-25 going up Ute Pass, and also several projects relating to Powers Boulevard, which is State Highway 21. So you'll see several SH 21 projects and several Highway 24 projects in the list. If I could, for example, just to take that 24 list. So you've got the Ridge Road there as number 8. If you go down to 13, you've got 24 and 31. As great as it says improvements, but it could be grade separation, right? You go down even further down and you've got a 24 and 26th Street, and you go down to the very last one and it's 24 and 21st Street. Now, when you get down to the bottom of the list, we're talking about, there's not a chance for a long time about ending up getting funding. We got the funding restrictions But there is something in the list about some strategies. Okay, and I think that's also really important. I think it's really important that we talk about this 24 West backups that are going on there, and to also talk about a semicircle around the eastern part of Colorado Springs. It's very important. And then there's also some additional rural issues that you can find in the list as well that are also important. So there's kind, if you will, I think there's kind of three major themes kind of in this list. And I'll make one last point that I think is really important. It's great that we've got the first 4 projects funded. I don't know what the probabilities are about getting, say, you know, somewhat 1 or 2 of the 5 through 8, getting them funded and where we might stand on that. But I think one of the things we want to do as a board is continue to encourage to get more of these projects moved from a TBD position to a funded position going forward. So maybe we can have Mr. Zamora talk about that point.
Sure. So if you could scroll down the list, I guess it looks like through your priority number 13, you know, basically that is the 10-year horizon that we're looking at. So, you know, everything we've included in the plan is, you know, based upon anticipated revenues. You know, we're definitely a lot more certain about the revenues in years 1 through 4 of the plan. That's why those are, you know, shown as essentially being funded if this does get approved. Revenues become a lot more fuzzy, you know, getting beyond year 4 of this particular plan. But, you know, assuming everything turns out the way we anticipate, you know, we would expect to be able to fund the remainder of those projects as well in years 5 through 10. You know, does this plan ultimately become a 12-year plan? You know, it's hard to say. It depends on how the revenues come in. You know, it could potentially become an 8-year plan. So, you know, the example of that is in our current 10-year plan, the first 4 years, we actually funded all except for 1 project within 3 years within Region 2. So, you know, it all depends on how the money flows. You know, we got the benefit of some COVID stimulus and various other funding sources as well. We're able to accelerate some stuff. But I think the key message on this is we anticipate, given the funding horizon, that this is what we would be able to accomplish. It helps us, you know, decide how we're going to spend money as, you know, we start completing projects, or the next ones we move into the pre-construction queue and try to get them advanced and moving forward and position even for some of these grant opportunities that are available within the federal bill as well.
Yeah, and thanks for ending on the grant. If I might, Mr. Chair, just wanted to.
I'm sorry, we have somebody online that we're hearing. If you could mute, please.
So
thank you.
We did mention the IIJA, and I think when Andy was talking with the city of Colorado Springs the other day, they came up as, hey, do we have a list of shovel-ready sorts of things? I don't want to say that this list beyond the funded is quote unquote shovel ready, but it's pretty darn close to shovel ready. It means, because if it's made it to this list, that means there's been some sort of environmental document, there's been some sort of consensus. So these would be the prime candidates to pick off and say, hey, we're going to go after an IIJA grant. Now, again, because these are Cdot projects, and we have to do that cooperatively, and Cdot's just gotten a grant writer, right? It might not be something that happens right away, but this can be looked at sort of the county, excuse me, the Cdot sort of shovel ready or close to shovel ready project, depending on what IIJA grant opportunities become available and how they define shovel ready within that grant opportunity and the different eligibility. So this is a start. So it's good that the state has taken this approach, because it makes us ready for when these federal opportunities come about.
Great, thank you. And I just think, you know, notwithstanding whether or not we all completely agree about is everything placed properly on the priority side of this, you know, moving something up or down or whatever, and we can have that conversation, whatever that is, and maybe it is the list at the moment. We have another task, I think, which is to help Cdot get to the funding, to work together to encourage the state to get us there, to work with our transportation commissioner, Commissioner Hickey, so that the Transportation Commission will continue to support those, because to Mr. Zamora's point, you have had success in recent history about getting those 1 to 4 year projects funded. We certainly want to make sure that continues. Having said that, our goal today is to approve this list. And so let's get back to that specific point.
And Mr. Chair, there is this list, and if we're done with that, you have an option. You can either vote on this and then we talk about the transit, or if you're done with this and you want me to start talking about the transit, I'm happy to do that now. And then you can approve both with one motion at the end. However you want to do it. If you want to. Keep it clean, sorry.
It's a good moment if questions are answered around the highway list. To conclude that, I know that Representative Terry Carver is calling in as we speak.
Okay.
So
So maybe let's just talk about the roadway list, then have Representative Carver speak, and then we'll do the transit list. Are there any last questions about the roadway list or any comment? Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. You made a good point. You said there's 3 priorities and you listed what they were. I'm having a hard time visualizing where all these different projects are. Is there a map that you have that shows these proposed different projects that would help us kind of see that whole picture? Not for now necessarily, but just as we go forward with this, it seems to me it would be a helpful support to this list.
Yeah,
It's a
we
good
don't,
question, yeah.
we don't have, Mr. Chair, members of the board, we don't have a map today, but that's certainly something we could do had we thought about it. Rich, oh, heck, you know which one you are.
Yeah, you know, as John said, we don't necessarily have a map today. We do have fact sheets around these projects that show a little more detail about what these projects are that are available on our website, and I can make sure that, you know, the links provided so everybody can see where those are at too.
Yes, please.
If I might make a comment, it seems to me like about a year ago, we had a briefing from Cdot and they were talking about a project that was used to make some of the access roads into the foothills more robust. So, you know, it'd be roads like I-70, Highway 24. Assuming my memory is correct, perhaps there's additional funding that could be used there for Highway 24. And since that's critical access into the mountains or, you know, from the mountains into Colorado Springs. So maybe that's one way that we could move up some of that work on Highway 24, you know, closer to the future.
So just to make sure I understand kind of your question. So are you, you're assuming there's additional revenue that may be available outside of what's shown in this 10-year plan is?
Well, yeah, this is based on my memory, so that's subject to verification. But it seemed to me like about a year ago, and we were meeting on Zoom, that it was someone from Cdot. I don't remember if it was Shoshana Liu or someone in Denver in the office there. They had something like $490 million to provide, you know, hardening or robustifying, if I can use that term, the, you know, critical roadways into the mountains back and forth. Since commerce, since travel and stuff like that is so dependent on those critical corridors. So that would just be a thought. Maybe there's something out there that doesn't fall within in our normal perspective that could be checked out, and maybe that could be used to help move Highway 24 along.
Yeah, and to my knowledge, I'm not aware of another revenue stream that would support doing that. Basically, everything that is shown in this plan is based upon what we anticipate getting out of Senate Bill 260, as well as the new infrastructure bill, basically. So, I mean, this is essentially the revenue we have available, minus some of our asset management kind of categories, you know, the surface treatment, some of those kinds of things. So I know there are grant opportunities specified within the federal legislation for resiliency kind of projects, you know, as opportunities for grants. And we're definitely exploring a lot of those as well. You know, that might be another opportunity to look at in terms of providing resiliency. You know, if something on I-70 shuts down, you know, 285, which encompasses part of PPACG, you know, gets used as an alternate route, as well as 24, of course, for everybody trying to get up.
And if I might, I don't know if Terry Carver is ready.
I am.
Okay, great. What I'd like to do at this point is to defer our conversation, which is a great conversation. We'll have a couple more questions and comments, but we have Representative Carver online at this point. I'd like to offer her the floor to chat for a few minutes and talk to us about some of her initiatives and what she sees going on in Denver during this legislative session. So Representative Carver, please proceed.
Well, thank you so much for your flexibility and letting me participate in your meeting by the magic technology that we have here. I want to start with the bill that Senator Liston and I are doing to modernize, in our view, the senior property tax exemption program in 2 important ways. And I just want to first say both of these issues were brought to our attention by our great county assessor, Steve Sliker. The first issue is seniors needing to move to another home for medical reasons. So their doctors are telling them move to a lower altitude, or they now have mobility impairment issues and they need to move to a house with no stairs. But for those seniors that qualify for the senior property tax exemption, that is, they're age 65 and they've lived in their home for 10 years or more, when they relocate, they lose that property tax exemption. And so what this bill would do is to say, if you are relocating for health reasons, could also be to, you know, get closer to care, that type of thing. You do not lose your property tax exemption. It is extended. The other aspect of this bill is to recognize how much home values have appreciated since the Colorado voters first passed the senior property tax exemption program and put it in the Colorado Constitution in the early 2000s. So right now, the senior property tax exemption provides that there is a 50% reduction in tax on the first $200,000 of the home's appraised value. And our bill would raise that to $400,000. And that, quite frankly, tracks how home values have appreciated in value. And I actually had some seniors come to my town hall last year and say, we're looking at having to leave the state of Colorado because we can no longer afford the property tax. And of course, they were on fixed income. And so I think that this is the time to update the program with that kind of adjustment, reflecting what has gone on with housing valuations. So that bill is up in the Senate committee tomorrow. So would urge those who are in a position to do so to contact the Senate State Affairs Committee and urge them to pass that. I believe County Assessor Schleicher will be up testifying for the bill tomorrow. The other
my
bills,
apologies,
go ahead.
Representative Carver. I've got a request from one of the members of the board. If you could mention the bill number at this point, the senior tax exemption.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I am drawing a blank on the bill number,
Well,
but I will get that to you. But if it's Senator Liston Carver under senior property tax exemption, and it's up in Senate State Affairs tomorrow.
Okay, so Andy Gunning, our executive director, will get that for us. So don't worry about getting it.
Perfect.
We have an alternate method. And this is the senior tax exemption, and that increase to 400,000 is also part of the senior tax exemption, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes.
But on the
yes,
senior
it's
tax,
going to do.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And on the senior tax exemption bill, I just confirmed this with Andy. The PPACG has taken a position of supporting that bill. So I think we have that position, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy.
And I'm trying to connect telepathically with Jessica. I know we supported it in concept, and I'm trying to remember if we got into the details in the legislative committee. Is that correct, Jessica? Okay, so we haven't reviewed the introduced version. It comports with our overarching goal for this year, but we haven't dug into the details yet.
Okay, great. So if I heard correctly from Representative Carver, and you can confirm this, it will be heard in committee tomorrow. Will they be taking testimony from the at that committee meeting?
Yes, both in person and remote.
Okay, so
you can go ahead.
Yeah, my apologies. So we might need to actually ask our legislative committee to maybe do a quick review of the introduced bill and get to a confirmation about support or otherwise. And then I think another thing, if I could ask the staff to do this, to send to the board members whatever the link would be in order to come online and testify for that bill, so that everybody will get an opportunity to do that. And I do see, I can't read it, but Commissioner Stone, go ahead and just tell me what you're saying there.
SB 22-093.
SB 22-093 is the bill. My bet is that this board would be interested in supporting that, but we actually have a process to officially get to that point. We might need to work pretty quickly to do that on the introduced bill. And Representative Carver, we have not actually ruled on our position on the bill, the introduced version of the bill, but when we heard that the bill was going to be introduced without seeing the words, we did support it conceptually. So we just kind of have to finalize our process there and hopefully get some members of PPACG to testify for that bill in the hearing tomorrow.
Great.
Okay, thank you. So if we could maybe proceed with that. And Representative Carver, is there another bill that you would have an interest in discussing with us here briefly?
Well, the majority of my remaining bills are in the criminal justice space. It is, we're doing a strengthening and an update of the statute on crime victims' rights. And basically, this is to ensure that the voices and views of the crime victims are heard throughout the criminal justice process. So the bond hearings, obviously the trial, the sentencing portion, parole hearings. Just last year, there were a number of bills that passed that provided a path to early parole. Now, for what it's worth, I voted against all of them. I thought none of them were justified, and they reached up to some of the most serious felonies. And of course, what's the effect? That you're shortening a judge sentence of the person who was found guilty. The victim and the victim's family, or the surviving family, if it's a murder victim, are thinking that the person is going to be in jail for X number of years. But now, lo and behold, there's all these additional paths to early parole. So to ensure that the victim is getting notification and an opportunity to present their views to the parole board on whether this person should get out early. So that's one bill. Also have been working with our local DA and Human Trafficking Coalition on strengthening our human trafficking laws. So we're working on that. And then we've got some issues coming out of some of the controversial issues that have come out with the judicial branch, and may be part of a bill to set up more of an independent commission to look at allegations of misconduct. That is still under discussion. No bill has been introduced yet. And so that's the gist of the bills that I'm working on, and maybe some more that pop up, but that's an overview.
Oh, thank you, Representative. Are there any questions from any of the members of the board for Representative Carver on any of those topics, but really just openly any topic? And hearing none, I just maybe would like to ask our legislative committee, I don't know if we've taken up for review any of those other criminal justice bills that Representative Carver mentioned. We have not. So Representative Carver, we have not addressed those, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my guess is we've probably perceived that they are not within the purview of PPACG. Okay, great, thank you. So kind of the focus of PPACG is not that particular area, but I can tell you anything about transportation and infrastructure, anything about helping seniors, And there are a few other topics, anything about unfunded mandates and anything that enhances local control. So those are the things we care deeply about. And wildfire mitigation is also a topic of great concern. So helping seniors, wildfire mitigation, transportation infrastructure, those are key things. Yes, we have one of our members would like to make a comment. Please go ahead.
I'd also like to add to that, the veterans. Not also with that.
And also things that support veterans. I appreciate you bringing that point up. So yes, Mayor Thompson.
Representative Carver, I would like to make sure the City of Monument and Fountain have gone together to hire William Much as our lobbyist. So please feel free to reach out to both of us through him.
Absolutely. Thanks for the heads up.
Great. And we appreciate the work going on in the senior tax exemption. We'll do that review. We'll get to a quick view. And I'm working on the assumption that this board will be supporting that, but we have to complete our due diligence. And then I think it would be great if we could have members of this board actually testify at the hearing tomorrow. That would be really outstanding.
Stan, may I ask a question?
Yes, please. Councilwoman Avila, go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Terry. I'm wondering how many of the seniors, and we're considering 65 and over, are property owners and how many are renters? Because we just had a discussion about people and senior living homes and what they're going through. So do you have that breakdown of how many are property owners and how many are renters?
I don't have those numbers. I think I could probably get a pretty good approximate number for El Paso. As far as statewide, I would have to touch on different databases, but no, unfortunately, I don't have that in hand. I can try and find that number and get it to you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Great. Thank you for the question and the response. It's awesome. Any other questions for Representative Carver? All right. Hearing none. Representative Carver, thank you very much for your willingness to call in and discuss some of your initiatives with us today. We encourage every member of our delegation to do that if they can find the time to do so. And so we deeply appreciate your willingness to do that. And obviously we must have found a break in some of your legislative work up there where you were able to dial in and talk to us for a little bit. And Representative Carver, do you have any last closing remarks or any other comments you'd like to provide to PPACG? And by the way, you're always invited when you're no longer in session to come and participate personally in any of our PPACG meetings and kind of see some of the work we do.
Well, I appreciate that greatly and always appreciate a chance to talk to the members of PPACG. The only other thing that I would encourage, and I know PPACG has Lauren Furman as your lobbyist, but never hesitate to reach out on a bill, especially if it has significance for PPACG or to your specific jurisdiction. And my cell is 719-425-7590. And if anybody doesn't have that, Jessica, I authorize you to share that by email and however, but I always welcome you contacting me and to express concern, opposition to a bill, if you need information, or if there's some aspect of an issue that's being dealt with up here at the Capitol, but the particular impact to your community, you're not seeing that being discussed. And so that's an important part of what we do here. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you, however briefly.
Thank you very much. And I think, Mr. Gunning, you have a point you'd like to make.
Just a real quick update, Representative Carver, since we lost Lauren to the state Colorado Chamber of Commerce office, we're now with Dan Jablan as our lobbyist. So just wanted to let you know about that when you see Dan walking the halls.
Okay, that is good to know. Thank you so much.
Outstanding. Once again, thank you, Representative Carver, and we wish you the best up there in Denver, and keep doing great work for our community.
Okay, well, thanks again. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Okay, that's awesome. I hope we can get other representatives to either come personally or via online and talk to the PPACG board. All right, let's get back to our task at hand. And we are still working on item, let's see, the item 5C. If I understand that correctly, yeah, item 5C, the Cdot 10-year plan. I do have one recommendation to, since we've completed our conversation with Representative Carver, to maybe just go ahead and start talking about the transit projects, because the package introduces both of them for us to vote on both together. So let's go ahead with the transit projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So now moving on to the transit list, what you had in your packet, we sort of discussed for the last couple of meetings. And then yesterday, or was it the day before, I apologize which, we received a quick updated list. And I think when Jeff Guthrie with Cdot and Brian Vituli with Mountain Metro Transit sort of sat down and took another closer look at it, they said, you know, we need to make a few more adjustments. So unfortunately, what is in your packet is not what we're asking you to vote for today. I apologize for that. We don't normally try to have a last minute sort of switch, but we did think that these changes were important enough that we did want to go ahead and say, yes, we'd like you to make this change and bear with us and do that rather than adopting the other list and amending it. We thought this would be the cleanest way of doing it. So, and if you could call this up, oh, Jessica, Jess has already done it. She's on top of things. She's already called it up. And again, I apologize for those of you on the Zoom call, you don't have in front of you, but those of you here in the room, you do have a copy. And what we wanted to do is we added a quick little column of little green arrows, little red arrows. So the projects with green arrows sort of moved up in priority, and the stuff in red arrows moved down in priority. Real quickly, Jeff or Brian, would either one of you be able to take a couple of minutes to sort of chat about the three that moved up and any of the red ones that moved down or off, and why that change was made?
Thanks, John. F. Guthrie here, Region 2 Transit Liaison. And sorry, Brian, if I cut you off, if you're about to speak, I'll turn it over to you here in a second. But just full caveat for the group, this past week, Region staff and Cdot were given much more granular fiscal constraint amounts. And so right after that, after I discussed that with Region 2 leadership, then I reached out to Brian to see if that would change any of Mountain Metro's priorities. And without shock, once you learn the actual budget numbers, that does tend to move things around. But thank you very much, John and PPACG staff, for putting in the green and red arrows. That always does help the color cues there. That being said, I can let Brian jump in with the MMT projects, starting with the first one, if anybody has any questions more in detail. But as you can see on there, initially the third project down, the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad corridor purchase, initially was in the years 1 through 4 grouping, and that's been moved down after internal conversations with Mountain Metro Transit planning staff. And then just below that, what has been advanced in priorities from outlying years into the first 4 years is a Fort Carson circulator shuttle service, I'll call it, as it says right there. And then please everybody note in the general notes column under column G that Mountain Metro has indicated that Fort Carson will also contribute funding to this effort. Please note everybody that the project above this Fort Carson circulator, the third one down, that BNSF order purchase, was listed as a funding need of 1.1 million. And as that was removed from the years 1 through 4 priorities, the new project, the Fort Carson circulator, is a cost of 1.5 million. So that is a $400,000 cost increase that does not lie within our fiscal constraint. And so it makes me happy to see that there will be partner funding contributing to this. And then secondly, that line number 7, I believe it says, there's a red arrow with the Mountain Metro Transit fixed route service increase stage 1. That has moved a little bit down in priorities. I'll let Brian Vituli expand on that, but I'm speculating that that has a lot to do with vehicle replacement schedules, along with getting staff back up to pre-pandemic levels to even be able to operate these routes. And then finally, on line number 8, the green arrow indicating upward movement, Mountain Metro staff have advanced the Academy Boulevard and Hancock Expressway Transfer Center up into the years 1 through 4 list of projects. That's a $3 million funding need, excuse me. And let's see, I don't think that there's anything more to highlight before I can turn this over to Brian, unless anybody has questions for me.
All right, thank you very much for the update. I don't know if you have a little bit more, John, or if we can open the floor for board member comments.
Brian, do you have anything else? We're up against time, so if you've got something really that they need to hear, great. But if not, we'll get straight to the board comments. They're going to give me the hook in about a half an hour. So
sure, yeah. Well, I'll just add a few items to that really quick, and I'll speak very fastly. But yeah, we apologize for the way that this happened. You know, the list that was in your packet was what was presented to you previously, and it's what the Transportation Advisory Committee acted on last month. And it wasn't actually until very late last week that we got fiscal constraint numbers from Cdot. So, you know, the good thing is that we do have a really long list of really good projects that we would love to fund. But, you know, unfortunately, with the amount of money available, we're very thankful for that, but, you know, we can only go so far down this list. So this revised list here, I think, kind of identifies our most crucial needs at this point. But if more money does become available, we'll be ready to go with additional items. So thanks for the consideration, and I'd be glad to answer any other questions.
Thanks, Brian.
Yes, Mayor Thompson.
I do have a question for you, Brian. I'm looking at the bus stop amenity program, and I'm also looking at the bus stop ADA compliance accessibility project. $1.88 million for that one, and then $1 million for the bus stop amenity program. Can those be combined in any way potentially to save funds? Because if you're going to be redoing a bus stop for the ADA, which is very, very necessary, but they're also getting amenities, I mean, it almost seems like the project is potentially appears on the surface to be kind of double dipping into different pots of funds and money to fund 2 different projects.
No, that's a very good question. Yeah, you will notice on the really long list that is in your packet, there are quite a few bus stop improvement projects. And, you know, just to answer that directly, we currently are working on implementing a $2.1 million ADA bus stop compliance project that was funded partially through the Multimodal Options Fund, also a federal Transportation Alternatives Program grant, as well as some of our local PPRTA dollars. So we are working very hard on improving a lot of our bus stops right now, but you know, with the fiscal constraint numbers and some of the other priorities that have kind of risen to the top, these bus stop improvement projects are still on the list, but they're just down a little bit further.
Well, that sort of answers the question, but I still didn't really clarify. You're asking for $1.88 million for the ADA compliance accessibility. You're asking for $1 million to build lockers and benches. It seems like the benches and shelters, if they're on your ADA list, would be coming out of that pot of money and not necessarily the $1 million that you're still asking for in additional funding. Can you kind of explain that a little bit better?
Well, yeah, these are all different bus stop improvement projects. The Multimodal Options Fund project that we're implementing now includes amenities along with the ADA improvements. So we'll be installing benches, shelters where appropriate, solar lighting to increase safety around some of those. So there's combinations of these projects that are on the list that are already being implemented through another project. And, as Jeff described earlier, you'll see that some of these bus stop improvement projects, while they're still on the list, they are just being bumped down a little bit due to funding constraints. So they are still projects that we would like to do. And, if additional funding does come along, we will address them.
Okay, and if I might interject just a minute, just a second here. So Mayor Thompson, I see the 1.88. Where's the other project on the list? It's
The bus stop amenity program is on this page. The other
okay.
page.
Bus stop amenity program. Thank you. There's the 1
Right.
million. Okay.
Yeah. And
So
then,
I think
I
Mayor
don't-
Thompson's question is, if you were to
Mike-
combine them, could we save a little money?
Well, and I guess the part of the other point is this went through TAC a certain way and was approved by TAC. And I really, really depend on the TAC. So they're the professionals, right, that do this. And the changes that are being proposed today did not go through TAC. Is this something that's priority, that this transit development program has to be adopted today? Or can we adopt the first part of it that was approved by TAC? And then this goes back through TAC again to come back to just for extra oversight on it.
Wendy Pettit, if you're still on the line, I'll ask you to sort of hop in. My understanding is that, again, they wanted to get this list adopted today so that we could bring it back in the form of tip amendments for those projects that are ready to go next month. That being said, if there is a desire for a delay, and I'm just shooting off the cuff here, so Wendy, please tell me if could we possibly postpone this item and have it be something that TAC discuss first, and then the next agenda item would be then the tip amendment, given how they do it. And then if we do that at the TAC, do that again here at the board, where one of the first items is adopting the priority list, and then the next item would be actually grabbing things off that list and doing a tip amendment. So Wendy, is that something we could do, or are we locked in, or did you have to go and you're not really, I'm talking to you,
I'm still here. So you're not talking to yourself. The most important thing is that we have a final funded list with the tip amendments at the March meeting. So if you want to take a step back and do it that way at the next board meeting, where we adopt the projects, priority project list, and then we do the tip amendment process, we're fine with that. We just need to have that final list done in March. Or you can do what Sharon suggested by adopting the list that's in the packet. We can make the changes and bring it all back with those changes next month as well. So the choice is yours, just as long as we have what we need to go to the statewide process in March.
So my recommendation, I think, I appreciate Mayor Thompson's comments, and it is always great to know that the staff has vetted it, that the TAC has vetted it. And so what I think I would recommend that maybe we do let the TAC go through it, let them get through the review. And what that'll mean is we'll address then the list and then the tip amendment. And we'll have to do both in the same meeting. And there's a little bit of risk about ending up with a longer discussion there on the March meeting, but it affords us the opportunity to have the staff fully vet this. And just to be fair to Cdot, I mean, what they did was they got the budget constrained numbers and they're offering that to us today. So, that it's better to have the latest and greatest information that we have a conversation about. So I'm still appreciative that Cdot did that, but I think it might be best to have the TAC do that. And that does, if we proceed with that, that does leave for us still an opportunity to vote on the road project side, but not the transit project side. And I would suggest that, doing that. Now, with that in mind, I know that Commissioner Stone had his hand raised before Terry Carver had come in and spoken, and I wanted to give him that opportunity. And I think that was a topic about the road projects, was it?
I was actually just in response to Mayor Graham's question about those routes up into the mountains. I believe what you were talking about, I think I was at the same meeting, is that Director Liu, along with the mayor of Colorado Springs and a lot of other elected officials, were at a meeting at City Hall where they were reviewing potential projects and improvements that would come as a result of the new fees, which they were implementing from the last legislative session. And at that, they specifically were talking about the I-70 and Highway 285 corridors. And I remember it because I actually made comment of, can we get Highway 24 added into problem areas for that? And they said, well, of course, this was actually our presentation for Dr. Cog, not necessarily for PPACG. So I think that may be what you're remembering, because I remember the same meeting as well.
That could well be. I appreciate your recollections. Thank you.
Okay, very good.
Well, I did remember it. I don't get invited to those meetings.
So before us is a couple of options here. May I propose that we defer the transit projects, let the TAC take an opportunity to vet those, and that maybe we vote on the road projects. And so I will stand by and wait for any motion to that effect, or to some other type of motion. And I'll make one last point to the question, Mr. Graham, about kind of getting a better understanding, or was it Mr. Graham or Mr. Zamora? I can't remember, but about kind of the list of 3 major areas that's in this road list. That could probably be pretty easily displayed with a regional map, and you just circle the projects and you'll see groupings. You'll see some groupings on Powers Boulevard, State Highway 21. You'll see some groupings on Highway 24 west of 25, and then you'll see these outlier rural things. They'll be broadly based on the map, but they can be categorized as rural projects. And that might be worthwhile, just kind of some kind of a single map visual that kind of shows where the projects are. Yes, Mayor Thompson.
I'll take a stab at a motion. Andy or John, please tell me if this is correct, because I just kind of crossed off from the proposed motion. Approval, I move that we approve the updated roadway development prioritized program list for inclusion in CDOT's 10-year pipeline of projects. So I just removed the words transit development because we're not approving that list. Is that?
And that will come back as a separate item. That works for me if it works for our friends at CDOT.
I'll second that.
All right, that's been moved and seconded, and it looks like I've got a head nod to the affirmative from Mr. Zamora. So it sounds like that we have a pathway here, which is great. Any last comments or questions from any of the board members at this time with regard to this motion and second? Make sure we've got a view of the folks online. All right, and hearing none, then let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? All right. Well, that was a long-winded discussion, but for whatever it's worth, I thought it was a great conversation that we had on that topic. All right, let's move on to the legislative update, 5D.
Good morning, everyone. Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. I want to kick off this item by asking our lobbyist, Dan Jablan, to just give us a super quick update from the Capitol, what's happening today, this week, that he feels like our board should know about. Dan, can you do that for me? He's on the phone, so I have to make sure. Probably getting unmuted. Okay, I'll kick us off instead. Okay, so as you all know, the Legislative Committee meets once a week, Mondays at 8:30. They review legislation that might be of interest to the PPACG board and programs and our legislative themes. And they discuss positions that they are going to suggest to the board. We email those out to our board of directors. You get those emails on Monday afternoons, and they say you've got 24 hours to let me know if you have any objections. Those objections are what we know if you guys want us to bring this discussion to the board for a longer discussion. Otherwise, we tell our lobbyists to go right ahead. This is our position. Tell our legislators, this is what we're doing. The only ones that were not in your agenda are the 2 from this Monday, Senate Bill 22-114, Fire Suppression Ponds Water Rights. And this is one that our Commissioner Dick Elsner has been working on very closely with CCI and some other organizations. that we are recommending support. And House Bill 22-1043, which is motorcycle and autocycle definitions, which we were also proposing to support. 22-1043. Okay. We are currently, does anybody have any questions about any of the bills that you got an email on? Anything I just said?
And keep in mind, there's a long list of bills that have support and opposed positions that's in the packet as well. So if you haven't had an opportunity to review those, I would encourage you to look through it pretty quickly right now. But they are pretty well vetted by the legislative committee.
This is Yolanda. I have a question.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Sorry. Jessica, I reviewed them, but I'm looking at the traffic signals and we're opposing that. Could you just give me a brief explanation of what that bill's about, what it is that they're trying to accomplish with having, I don't know, is it standardized traffic or what are they trying to accomplish? I know we're opposing it, but I want to know what they're trying to accomplish.
Jessica? This is Dick Elsner.
Yes, please.
Well,
Commissioner Elsner, go ahead.
Yeah, I had like 5 layers of windows open and, you know, by the time you dive down through and hit the unmute, it's a little late. This one, CCI took an opposed position. Basically, what it would mean is that the state then determined that it was okay to do this everywhere rather than leaving it to the local jurisdictions. Right now, if a local jurisdiction wants to do it, they can. You know, my example when we were talking about it at CCI was we have exactly 2 lights in Park County, and I would not want the state saying someone could coast through either one of them being in Fairplay and the other one being at Crow Hill. So the reason CCI took an opposed position, and I think the reason we took the opposed position, is it's taking away local jurisdiction and our ability to say, no, that is stupid in this case. Don't do it. The state is kind of preempting our ability to make the decision that we should be responsible for.
Thank you. And that did come out loud and clear and why we were opposing it. What I'm trying to get to is what was their, why do they want to do it? Do they want, like,
the
for
bicycle
instance,
lobbyist.
Sorry?
The bicycle lobbyist. It's everybody that has one of those, a bicycle or things that are covered by this, that doesn't want to bother to follow the same traffic laws that cars do.
Okay, I was hoping to get something more like a summary, something more. Well, if you could send that to me, Jessica, you know, what, in maybe just in a paragraph, what is the reasoning that they're proposing the bill? I would appreciate that.
I will, and I will chime in for those of you who may not have caught it. What we're discussing is House Bill 1028, statewide regulation of controlled intersections. So that's the bill that we've been talking about. And part of the reason why this was proposed is to attempt to create one policy across the entire state for how intersections are managed. And that was the positive reason that it was proposed. That is what they were aiming for, is a uniform and easily understandable plan that everybody could rely on, that being the situation. I hope that helps too.
Okay, great.
I guess I just want to take a little bit of a deeper dive, but
I will.
So if you can help me with that, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for your comments, Yolanda, and Commissioner Stone, you've got some comments as well.
Yeah, I think an easy explanation to it that was presented to us when we were at CCI was that the folks that were supporting this said it would be difficult for bicycle operators to know what the law was as they crossed from Lakewood into into Golden or the next jurisdiction. So thus, by having a statewide standard that said that bicycles can always roll through traffic lights or stop signs, then they would know they could always do it. And I think the big pushback, especially from the rural areas, is that we have traffic lights and stop signs that are located in places where people are traveling at excessively high rates of speed, and that should be controlled locally and not through a single fiat coming out of a lobby that just wants it simpler for bicycle riders.
And I would say,
That's helpful.
yeah, and I think
Yeah, Eric said that very well.
Thank you, Commissioner Stone, and I appreciate the point. I think that, some of the areas that would have the largest impact actually would be our urban areas, our municipalities. So the city of Colorado Springs, I don't know how many traffic lights you have, but it's hundreds at least. And this would take away local control about how to manage those intersections for bicycle use and place it in the hands of the state. And then if they decide that bicyclists can just take the red light as advisement, but travel through, that would be the what the bicyclists could do, and the municipality might not have an interest in that because it's a very dangerous intersection. So we would basically, if this is passed into law, we lose that ability for local government to manage these intersections one way or another.
Yes, that came out loud and clear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Yeah. Are there any other questions on? So I think if I can understand correctly, what's in the packet, those are our positions that we've taken. So we don't need to vote on those.
What we do ask for a vote is just to ratify those positions. And then before we get to that point, after Representative Carver's presentation, we'd like to have a short discussion about Senate Bill 22093, which is that homestead tax exemption that she was discussing. And what that does is, as she said, it's concerning the expansion of existing property tax exemptions for owner-occupied residences, and increasing the exempt amount of actual value. And this is the senior and veteran homestead tax exemption. We shorten it, but this is for both.
Okay, great. But would it be okay if we maybe separate these things out and kind of get through some of this right away? So we've got a list, and you're asking us to ratify the list that's in the packet. And then you also had two that were deliberated over on Monday, which, if I understood correctly, was Senate Bill 22114 and
1043.
And also 1043. Are they on the list?
They are not, because
They
they
are
were not
Because they
discussed
were
yet when we
they were
made the
deliberated on
packet.
Monday.
So normally what we do is we do one motion that's all of them, including the two new ones,
Right.
and then would.
So what I'd like to do is let's have a conversation and finish our conversation about the items on the list, and then the two that were deliberated over on Monday, include those in, which is Senate Bill 114 and Senate Bill 1043. And I'll entertain a motion, and then we'll have a conversation about any of these. If anybody has any questions about what's on the list in the packet or these other two bills, this will be the opportunity. So yes, go ahead.
I have a question about House Bill 1026 of this year. The fiscal note is highly concerning to me. I understand that it's not unfunded mandates. That said, the amount of money that is going to come out of the taxpayers' pocket, as well as the employer cost, is.
It's on the packet list.
It's on the packet list. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we're going to pull it up here.
1026. I would like to draw attention to the fiscal note itself. The amount of money that this is going to cost is immense. These are obviously just estimates. But when I'm looking at, total expenditure by employers, tax year 2023, $39.7 million. When I look at the fact that we're again asking for Tabor, it's going to cut into constituents' Tabor tax refund. This bill is highly concerning to me.
Okay, and maybe you could respond to that question about how the legislative committee deliberated over that and how they reached their conclusion, because it is a proposed position of support.
And I'll actually tag in Dick and Sharon, but I will add in that at the time we review these bills, we don't always have the fiscal notes.
Yeah.
Which is why it's such a great idea for folks to bring things back up to us. So do Dick or Sharon want to say anything as my co-chairs?
And don't all leap out at once.
Looking for my unmute again. You know, a part of the reason, of course, 1026, if you look at who is running the bill, you know, we like to support people that we know and like. And it's, you know, an attempt to get people, I think, to use alternate forms of transportation. And the way you do that is through incentivizing the employers. And unfortunately, to incentivize employers, you have to give them tax credits. And it is just, again, trying to get people off the road and using alternative forms of transportation.
So if I understand correctly, this was a permissive bill. And that means that the employers could opt to use it or not use it. And then if they choose to use it, then you have kind of a, if you will, kind of a private process to reduce road use, but by whatever they intend on doing with that company. And then if they do that and it meets the requirements, they would get a tax credit for it, right?
Right. Instead of being able to use it as a tax deduction. Of course, you know, a deduction is great, but, you know, it gives you the amount that you pay as a percentage of taxes. You know, so if you're in the 20% tax bracket, then you get a 20% credit for what you've spent, where this would give you the entire amount that you spent on this program as a credit.
And I'd say as a generalization, and we'll give you an opportunity to speak again, as a generalization, I always have a preference to let kind of private activities pick and choose how to do that instead of having it rammed down our throats from the state through some type of mandate from the Air Quality Control Commission or something like that. That doesn't necessarily answer the question about the fiscal note. But yeah,
This is Dan.
Go ahead, Dan.
Hi, sorry, I've been on for the last hour and 10 minutes, but I finally just figured out how to unmute. But your last discussion was very riveting. It is a very large fiscal note, and this is Commissioner Vanderwood, to your point there, I think you were getting it. This is more of the carrot idea. With talking to the bill sponsors, the tax deduction did not work and incentivize any real participation. So what they're trying to do through this bill is incentivize more participation by sweetening the pot. But it does create a rather large fiscal note, and the bill requires an appropriation to the Department of Revenue for $93,000 for 0.2 FTEs to administer this plan. But it's really the bill sponsors, and they do have some strong bill sponsors trying to use the carrot approach to get the companies and organizations to do this in more of a carrot type approach.
Yes, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, and just, I think part of our fear we've suggested as far as staff, that something more draconian may be coming, and I think it has already just dropped, just found out about that last night. So we thought this, given Senator Liston's support from our region and some other strong sponsors, as Dan mentioned, we thought this would be the better of the other evil that.
Yeah, some of the other, I don't know what the other proposals are, but I mean, we know there's been discussions in Denver about using government force to force companies to carpool. And I can tell you El Paso County's view of that is that's a privacy violation. And what we're trying to do, I think, to the point you're making, Andy, is maybe get to some level of support for something that's less invasive than that, to try to head off some of the more dangerous bills that we think would be dangerous. Go
I
ahead.
completely understand your concern on the fiscal note and the TABOR. But we're trying to support voluntary measures for trip reductions through businesses rather than mandated. And this is a voluntary. I understand that, but rather that than having it, like they were saying, forced down our throats where if anybody has more than 100 employees at one location, they are going to be forced into ride sharing and other creative bicycling and different things. So we were trying to support.
So,
Yeah,
voluntary
can I
bills.
interrupt for a second?
yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, one of the bills that they've been talking about is if you have more than 100 employees, a minimum of 20% of them have to carpool. And they were playing with that number up to maybe up to 50% would have to carpool. This gives the incentive for companies to try to do that. Long time ago in my previous life, when I worked for Mobil Oil, I drove a van pool for Mobil, and this is back in the 70s. I guess it was really early 80s, and they were heavily subsidized. I mean, they actually could write off the cost of the van itself and everything else, trying to get people to carpool, and it worked quite well. And this is one of their attempts to get people off the road and clean up the air. So again, to me, it is something that this is a lot better than what may come down. And I'm hoping that we can get behind something that is a lot better and oppose a lot worse, and still let people know that, yeah, we're really interested in protecting the environment. We just want to make sure it's done in a reasonable and sensible way.
So I appreciate all the comments, and I think we'll have a little bit of different views on this particular piece of proposed legislation. Go ahead, Jessica, but before you speak, what I'd like to do is maybe, we'll get to this, but maybe offer that we vote on 1026 separately, and then we still have the rest of the list, and that gets us through the rest of the list, and then we can maybe have a specific vote on 1026, and we'll have some people that I think will not be supporting, but we have to vote, and we'll go with the majority at that point. So Jessica, you had a comment?
I do. I know your concern was the fiscal note on it, and especially the potential for Tabor impact and its impact to individual taxpayers. When we were engaged with the E-Trip discussion, which is employee trip reduction programs that the Air Quality Control Commission was considering until we were able to work with the chamber and convince them to not do it, the potential impact to businesses was up to $10,000 per employee for employers who this would be eligible for. And that cost impact would have directly impacted everyone. Whether it was directly as an employer or as an employee. And that may be one of the places where Senator Liston, who I know is very concerned about Tabor impacts and other things, may have had that thought process. But again, with the fiscal impact coming directly from, I did just want to add that fact about the E-Trip that they were planning to do to us was going to cost a lot.
And if I could maybe I think many of us would perhaps agree with that, but if I could maybe try to characterize this in a slightly different way as well. And just first of all, it is a tax credit, right? So it's not the state paying a company to do carpooling. It's the state giving a company tax credit. So another way to potentially view it is a permissive program, and if you do X or Y, we will reduce your taxes. We'll reduce the company's taxes as a result. And many of us do support reducing taxes. So it's another way to look at it. They got to figure out how to deal. The state would have to figure out how to deal with a reduction in revenue, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Asking the state to operate with less revenue and keep it in the hands of companies and people. So that the companies and folks can use that money to do other things. So there's another way to look at it. They got to figure out how to deal with the lower revenue. But with everybody's permission, let's take HB 22-1026 off of the rest of the list. And are there any questions on any of the other items that's on the list? And this is to ratify the list. All right, hearing no other questions. Oh, is there someone's hand raised? Okay. Is there anybody online that would like to speak up? We don't see any hands raised. And hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to ratify that list that's in the packet, but not including HB 22-1026.
So moved. This is Dick Osner.
I was going to second it, but I wanted to clarify that we're going to vote on the list and then we'll come back immediately and vote on 1026.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's what I'm proposing.
And whether your side wins or loses, this goes up to the state. And then if you are on the losing side of it, then you get the chance to contact those legislators and tell them why you voted no on it. So your voice is actually stronger if you're in the minority. So, okay. So I second it.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded for the list that's in the packet other than 1026. Any other questions or comments?
And that includes.
That will include the Senate Bill
114 and 1043.
1014 and 1043. That includes those as well. Okay, very good. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, hearing none. Those are ratified now. So please proceed to continue to push for those. And I'm sure since Dan Jablan is on the line, he's got the message as well. Let us now proceed to a vote on House Bill 22-1026. Open the floor for any further discussion, although we've had a lot of discussion about it so far.
I make a motion in support of 1026.
And
Dick Elsner, I'll second that.
so there's a motion and a second, and now we need to see if there's any additional discussions on this particular item.
I would like to say something, and I think, Mr. Chair, you said it great. There's a fiscal note attached. Well, the fiscal note is we're giving more money back to businesses that pay a lot of taxes. I'm always in favor of trying to get money back in the hands of the people. And this is a good example of that. If it was a fiscal note where the money was going to government, I'd have a little bit of issue. But this is a fiscal note where the money is going to end up back in the hands of the people that need it.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. And I can see from the nonverbals that we still have one dissent. And Darcy, if you wanted to make maybe a last comment on this particular item before we vote.
Everyone's differing opinions. I just I don't see it that way because the money originally came from the people and now we're just redistributing it.
Thank you. I appreciate that point. All right. Are there any other comments or questions? All right. Hearing none. We did have a motion in a second, so let's go ahead and proceed with the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Thank you. And are there any nays?
Nay.
Okay, we do. We have 2 nays. We have 2 nays. So let's make sure that's recorded. We have 2 nays. Okay. And I think we had more than 2 ayes. So I believe that passes as well to ratify for that position.
Well, Mr. Chair, it takes 2/3. So if you have 4 ayes, you're okay.
Okay. Thank you. I think we made it. All right. Let's go ahead then and proceed because we have a couple of others that we need to address right now. And my apologies, this is taking a long time. This is turning into a long meeting, but they are important topics.
I'll be
Go
as
ahead.
quick as possible. So as we said, Terry Carver had brought up Senate Bill 22093. And just because her request was for us to move on it a little bit quickly, as our board chair also mentioned, we'd love to be able to help make that happen. I gave you all a quick description of it.
Is that the senior tax exemption?
That is the expanding the senior and veteran property tax exemptions. Did anybody have any questions on it or discussion that they'd like to add?
Any comments or questions from anybody online or in the room?
Or a proposed motion?
I make
All
a
right.
proposed motion to support.
Second, Eric Stone, Teller County.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Anybody need any further discussion on that? Yes, sir. Go ahead. Or you just turned the mic on the vote?
You got ahead of schedule.
Yeah, you did. You jumped the gun, but it's all good. All right. Yes, Commissioner Stone, you have a
Just a very
comment.
quick comment. I know we're short on time, but this actually is a very real issue in high altitude counties where we have many residents who are making a decision between a doctor's recommendation that they live at lower altitude and then understanding that they're giving up a significant homestead tax exemption. Also with our raising rights, just same as it is here in El Paso County and across the state. I actually get multiple emails, especially now that the assessor's notes have gone out with valuations of people concerned about how they will, on fixed incomes, will be able to continue to pay property taxes in Colorado. And so I think that it's appropriate to increase that exemption for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yeah, not just high altitude counties, also rural areas. Okay, especially in our area, we have such a distance to get to a medical facility. And these people then, whenever they sell to move like to Falcon or something like that, that they lose a lot of money and stuff.
Great. Thank you for that comment as well. Any other comments with regard to Senate Bill 22093? All right, hearing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? All right, Willie, we have an official position of support, and I am glad we voted in support of that as well. I strongly support that. For me, it's an issue of getting to more efficient housing, allowing people that are in larger homes to move to smaller homes where they can balance their budget better and be able to have the portability of that sales tax exemption come with them so they can still receive that benefit. And the other value of that is the other side that's often not talked about. That leaves these other homes available for families because they need a bigger place. So this bill gets us to better efficient utilization of the housing that we have in place. And we all need that because housing is expensive. So thank you. Are there any other bills to consider?
There are no other bills. There are just two other items under your legislative update. And those two items, the legislative breakfast has been scheduled. This happens annually. We drive up to Denver at dark 30, and that's actually 7:30 to 8:45 a.m. I get to Denver by 7:30 is a bright and shiny drive. So that is scheduled. It's going to be March 4th. I'm going to be sending out a calendar invite to all board members so that if you'd like to attend, you can. And the week before, I'll also be sending out a hey, head count, guys. So you will hear about this more than once. And the second and last thing I have on legislative items is your legislative themes brochure is on the table right here, next to where your name tags are. So if you would like to grab a few, and every time you meet with your local legislator or someone who's at the Capitol for you, hand them one and just remind them that this is PPACG's issues. We've had, honestly, handing those to our legislators and having them handed out by you as our board members is the most effective way for our legislators to refer to them.
Thank you. I appreciate both of those comments. And I can tell you the legislative breakfast, which we started a couple of years ago, has been very well received by our delegation. They like hearing from us, and it's an effective communication tool. I would encourage you to go, even though you do have to leave at dark 30. And the brochure, please take a couple copies because our delegation, but really every legislator in the House and Senate, they get to see kind of the major themes that we care deeply about. And, several of those include no unfunded mandates and local control. But I also appreciate, and it's probably still on that, is that the most effective road mile traveled is the one not traveled. And that includes getting more broadband for our residents because then they can do more work from home. So there's a lot of great things in there, and all the legislators appreciate receiving that. So yes, please.
Andy, that is the same day as our PPACG pre-meeting. So is that going to be, are we going to be changing that to later in the day or?
It's a good question, and I haven't figured that out yet, but we may do something brief in the afternoon by Zoom only, or maybe we'll figure something out. Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to kind of put that on people's calendars too, to be a little flexible with that. Okay.
Outstanding. Okay, I think we are concluded with 5D. That took quite a large amount of time, and so my apologies for taking so long. Yes, please go ahead.
This is Dan. Can I have one more minute, because there were big happenings at the Senate this morning.
Yes, please go ahead.
Most of you, as you know, Senate President Garcia stepped down and resigned effective February 23rd to take a presidential appointment at the Pentagon. This morning, the Senate voted to make Senator Steve Finberg, the current majority leader, the Senate president. Senator Dominic Moreno, he's out of Boulder. Senator Dominic Moreno out of Adams County will leave the JBC and become the Senate majority leader. And Senator Rachel Zinzinger from Arvada will now take Senator Moreno's spot on the JBC. But they just voted on those changes where there will be a shift in leadership now moving forward in the Senate, moving forward. So I just wanted to let you know that did happen, and that happened this morning, and that's probably the biggest thing that's happened at the Capitol this week.
Thank you very much. And if you could repeat that first name, I didn't catch it.
The new
Finberg.
Senate president, the new Senate president will be Steve Finberg. The new Senate Majority Leader will be Senator Dominic Moreno. And then taking his spot on the Joint Budget Committee will be Senator Rachel Zenzinger.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that
You bet.
update.
And I will say, it probably won't change the voting pattern, but it will shift that chamber or that caucus a little bit further to the left, because Senate President Garcia voted as a very moderate Democrat. So it will be, probably will not change any vote counts, but it could change the philosophy of that chamber moving forward.
Thank you. I do appreciate your giving us that update. Anything else before we move off the legislative agenda?
Nope.
Okay, thank you so much, and appreciate all the great work you're doing for us up there.
Thank you.
Okay, let us now then at this point move on to the ozone litter. This is item 5E.
Sure, Mr. Chair, you've got a draft letter in the packet and we can maybe pull that up. We've talked about this before, how we're not meeting the ozone standard, the federal EPA standards for our region. We don't have to go into non-attainment. That doesn't necessarily need to be our destiny, but we're looking for some short-term help. And that would be in the form of the governor directing his CDPHE staff to ask US EPA to take off of our calculation several days of really bad wildfire smoke that impacted our measurements in August of 2020. That's when we had our 3 largest wildfires in state history as far as land area. Talking to CDPHE staff, they feel it's very justifiable that those should be taken off of our calculation. They really do fall into the classification of exceptional events. And if those come off of our record, then we are still attaining the standard, which is good, at least as of now. And it buys us a little more time. So just asking for your permission to finalize it and send this off. It was reviewed by the AQTC, or Air Quality Technical Committee, here within the region, and they recommended approval when they met about 2 weeks ago.
Great. And I'll have some comments in a second, but I'll open the floor if there's any other comments on this letter. All right. Yes, Mr. Zulaga.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for tying it back to the Western Governors Association, and just that was very nice.
Thank you. Any other comments? And I think it's great that CDPHE is actually agreeing with this. And so I think part of this is actually formalizing it, so they have the formal position for us to help push them along, and maybe backing out a little bit and coming to a broader conversation. You know, I appreciate that they'll take this under consideration and maybe help us get there to remove these exceptional events. I'm going to just continue to stand on the position that it shouldn't even be an exceptional event. We should never have to mess with our economy because of somebody else's pollution. But at least this is a step in the right direction. It just isn't all the way to where I feel we should go, but I'm just thrilled that we can at least get there on this particular point. And for the board members, you may be well aware of the fact that if we end up in non-attainment on any item, it's a 20-year painful process of interacting with the EPA that is costly and forces other types of activities. And we are the last major population center on the Front Range of Colorado that does not have that non-attainment status with the EPA. So, and I think that speaks well to this community's continued work to deal with those emissions and meet EPA requirements. So, so I'm just glad that we're doing this, but I still feel strongly about, you know, continuing to fight for some measure of permanently removing that from the calculations. Commissioner Stone.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would move that we approve the draft letter as presented and authorize the chairman to sign.
I'll second that.
All right, that has been moved and seconded. Thank you very much. One last opportunity for comments. And hearing none, let's go ahead and proceed with the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? All right, that passes as well. And so we've now formalized that. We have our letter and appreciate that very much. Let's move on to information items. And since we've taken so much time, maybe we can just be a little more abbreviated on the information items in the report. So thank you very much. Please proceed on 6A.
Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communication Manager. Fairly regularly, we're asked to take a look at the bylaws of PPACG Board of Directors and make sure they reflect everything as it currently is and needs to be. When we looked at these, we realized there were 2 spots that needed to be revised that staff are suggesting. At the board workshop on Friday, we did actually get a slight tweak to the recommendation that was in your board packet. In the board packet, under meeting participation, it said board members may participate remotely to encourage regular participation by all members. This is on page 2 of the bylaws, and I'm 34 in the packet. What we would like to ask, to let you know we're going to ask for at our next meeting, is that board members are encouraged to participate in person, but may participate remotely in PPACG board meetings to encourage regular participation by all members. That was to reflect that there is a certain amount of great value in being here in person, but that if it's the choice of being here in person or not being here, pretty, please sign on.
Yes, Commissioner Stone.
Yeah, just a quick question. I mean, obviously, this is in response to what we've been doing because of the pandemic. Obviously, we're coming out of Omicron. There's great hope within the medical community, within the public health community, that Omicron is the golden bullet finally, or the silver bullet, which is that we want, that ultimately results in this becoming an endemic rather than a pandemic response. Personally, I look forward to in-person meetings everywhere where possible, but was wondering about whether this needs to be a bylaw because of a temporary nature of what we are currently doing versus moving forward as an accommodation due to pandemic versus a new life under endemic.
And
Actually, we were in discussion of this before COVID even hit. We were discussing it because we were sometimes having trouble making a quorum. I realize right now we have a super group of people that are really, really active. In the past, we've had trouble getting business done. And so we were trying to attempt to make it for people. For example, if you're up in Green Mountain Falls or up here, Teller County, the weather all of a sudden goes bad or you have car issues that morning, you can still dial into the meeting. So we really would prefer people be in person because that's where the relationships are built. But understanding that we would rather have regular participation than you not saying my car wouldn't start this morning, so I couldn't come. And so we're just left out.
And
so it was already in the works.
Yeah. And to that point, I think we've noticed increased participation, sometimes participation of every board member. And in some cases, right, they might have another important meeting they need to go to that would be right after this meeting, but they can't go to the other meeting because they got to drive 2 hours back to that meeting. So basically, we just basically want to encourage everybody to participate in person, but I think we want to make permanent the ability of any member to dial in Zoom because we've basically proven out the technology and we can still vote and it does work.
Right. And not a criticism, but an observation.
Yeah.
As you look around the room, it's like the people that are here are actually the people that came from distance, who should be the ones you would think who are dialing in more. But it's Monument, it's Teller County, it's, Calhan, and as well as Fountain. And thank you, Mr. Chair, of course, for being here in person as always. But I agree that, the personal relationships are why I like these live. So that's why I would question it as a bylaw change.
And that's why I'm here. I like the personal interaction, but I think,
we didn't even, before this was in the bylaws, we didn't even have it in the bylaws. You could come in remotely.
Right.
And so people were actually asking for it. And so we did put it in and we wanted to stress those unusual circumstances, but I think people are just gotten used to this technology now. And unfortunately, they're double booking themselves into back-to-back meetings on Zoom, where you don't even get 5 minutes to stand up and exercise. So
oh yes, Mr. Zulaga.
Yeah, I would say that I hesitantly agree that the technology's moved in and is taking over some of the meetings. I totally share Commissioner Stone's sentiment that relationships are built in person, and there's nothing electronic. It gets you there, it gets you the information, but it's a lot different dynamic. So
Yeah.
if you can lean more towards a preference of physically being there, I do, however, understand the inevitability that technology is with us and it's going to be part of where we
And-
move forward.
Thank you very much. And if I could, I'm reading the words that are in there right now. Board members may participate remotely in PPACG board meetings to encourage regular participation by all members. And actually, it's kind of suggesting that remote does that, but it doesn't actually say, but we encourage personal participation. So
So like I said, we did actually, because of the workshop, make a suggestion that was not in the packet.
thank you. Oh,
Which
great.
changes that,
Okay.
sorry, I might have said it too quietly. The change we are suggesting is to say board members are encouraged to participate in person, but may participate remotely to encourage regular participation by all members.
Thank you. Okay. That I think is a better reflection of the sentiment, and we can still have the conversation about whether it needs to be in the bylaws or not. My personal view is it's fine having it in, but we can still continue that conversation, and maybe we end up with the board pulling it out. But we're not voting on this today, so we can. Yeah, did we have someone else online? Okay, Mr. Elsner.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, I try to be there all the time. But today I had a meeting at 9 o'clock. I've got a meeting at 10 or at 12, so I'll be leaving this. And then I have a meeting at 1 and I have a meeting at 7. And when you add in trying to drive for a total of almost 4 hours, you just can't do all of that. So to me, it is critically important. I really think it needs to be in the bylaws. Anybody that said, well, I think if it's in the bylaws, it will preclude any issues later on voting on something that may be contentious, and someone says, well, they weren't here, so they aren't allowed to vote. If we have it in the bylaws, it makes it very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment. And I think I saw Commissioner Bremer, you had your hand up, but I think you just lowered it. So did you have any comments?
I'm good. I think I did notice that when Jessica sent out the recurring meeting notices for this year, she did put it up until noon, which I realize for PPACG staff is significant because you have PPRTA coming in at 1 as well. But I think that has helped a little bit because it used to be that we were done by 11, but we have a lot of good business, a lot of important things that really are taking that extra hour. And I think up to right now, it's kind of been a little bit of a scheduling thing, at least personally for me. And I'm looking to clean that up. And it helped Jessica to have the meeting notice actually go until noon on my calendar. So thank you.
And that's many thanks to Jessica Bechtel, our amazing office person, manager,
Great.
director. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, so in the interest of continuing forward, I think you wanted to talk about the other changes, and there's not many, but
There
go
are
ahead.
2, and they're both super simple. One of them is notice of meeting, putting in what you guys put in our Cora and Sunshine notices this year that we can also post on the website. And then the last one is under the legislative committee. And that's to correct us to fit the practice we've been doing. Your bylaws say that the board chair appoints your legislative committee chair. In our practice, the legislative committee has been voting for their own chair or co-chairs. So we'd like to amend that to remove that, cleaning up language. And then the practice that we have done is that the legislative positions are formalized by a vote of 2/3 of the board of directors. It was never in here, and the practice has changed in the past 5 years from a requirement of unanimous to this 2/3 vote. And because it wasn't in the bylaws, it had remained very messy. So those are the total of 3 changes that we are asking for, that we will bring to you next month.
Great. So we'll vote on that next month, and just keep in mind, please review the bylaws. And if you have any other suggestions, get that to the staff so that we can get that into the board packet as a proposed changes for next month. And then, of course, we can always offer amendments on the floor at the meeting itself. Yeah, okay, great. Any other comments or questions on the bylaws at this point? All right, hearing none, let's go into item 6B, 2021 fourth quarter strategic plan update. And Jessica, this is yours as well.
This one will be incredibly quick. Jessica McMullen, your Policy and Communications Manager. As you know, the Board of Directors amended their strategic plan in 2020 and created it in 2018. As part of that process, we promised that we would come back to you and tell you what we were doing to progress on this report so it didn't become a shelf document. You were given an attachment with a bunch of detailed things, and your agenda item did just show some of the highlights we thought were really neat. Unless someone has a question, I'm not going to dig into those. You can read them.
Very good. And I would encourage the board to take a look at them because we do have objectives and goals. And if you feel like PPACG is not meeting some of those, we certainly are going to want to hear about that and let Andy know. That's very important because when they get feedback from us on the board, it helps them to do a better job. So we'll just leave that at that point. Let's move on now to item 7A. And do we have anybody from any of the military installations still on? I see Colonel Jimmy John, if I pronounce that correctly. My apologies if I pronounced that wrong.
No, Mr. Chair, that was about the best I've ever heard it. So just a couple things. Good morning, board members. Of course, the big thing for us, as many of you probably read in the Gazette, is that the developer who will be building our new visitor center was able to sell the last of the bonds in January. We're currently working with the developer on a few key actions. We hope to issue them the notice to proceed to begin phase 1 soon. So it's good to report some progress there. For your situation awareness, Colonel Leonard, our installation commander, will be attending the Association of Defense Communities National Summit in Washington, D.C. from 7 to 9 March. And then finally, just a couple events to make you aware of. Of course, at the end of the month, we'll be hosting the 29th Annual National Character and Leadership Symposium. That's one of our big events of the year. And then for any hockey fans, our hockey team will be playing Holy Cross this weekend. So pending any questions, thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much and appreciate the updates. And I haven't finally committed to it yet, but I'm considering also the ADC conference on 7 to 9 March as well, participating in that. All right, very good. Thank you so much. Any questions for the Air Force Academy? Outstanding. Do we have anybody else from any of the other military facilities? I don't see any. Okay. All right. Item 7B through 7F are minutes included, and you can review those. Let's go on to 7G.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Richard Zamora, Cdot Region 2 Director. Just a couple of things to bring up in the interest of time. We talked about one big topic that CDOT's working on right now, which is our 10-year plan update. I just wanted to mention a little bit of caveat to the planning totals that we had in front of us that we developed a plan around with all of our planning partners, and that that's staff's best guess what those revenues are going to be. They have yet to be adopted by STAC or Commission. They're going to be discussed with STAC on Friday and with Transportation Commission next week. So hopefully they'll be formally adopted next week. I also just want to talk about, you're well aware, CDOT's been working to enact rules for greenhouse gases. Those have been adopted by the Commission in December. We also need to implement various policies and procedures that go along with those. And that work is ongoing right now as we speak. And there's going to be some discussion at Transportation Commission next week in one of their workshops about status and schedule and those kinds of things related to those. And then finally, we're going to forego project updates this month. Nothing's changed a whole lot, but just one thing to note. One of our major projects in the area, the Powers and Research Project, actually set 8 of the 16 girders last night. The remaining 8 are going to be set tomorrow night. So a lot of progress being made on that particular project. Unless you have any specific questions about projects, we can defer those to Shane.
Great. Thank you very much. And does Shane have any follow-up, or are we good to go?
In the interest of time, we said we kind of leave it open. And if anybody has any specific questions,
okay,
they
great.
can ask those. If not,
Are there any? Thank you. Are there any questions for CDOT at this point on any of those updates? All right, very good. Let's proceed to 7H, that stack update. And I don't know if Holly is on.
Yeah, Commissioner Williams may have had to jump back off. Yeah, she's off. John had to run because he had a conflict also at noon. I know there's a big stack meeting coming up this Friday where there's going to be some discussion around some of the formula distribution. with MMOF and the RPP formulas. And I know that John has been chatting with Commissioner Williams, and if we need to connect with Commissioner Stone as well to kind of just discuss where our thinking is with that, we're happy to do that. But that's all I know at this point. Anything else, Rich? No? Okay.
This is Dick Elsner.
Yes, please.
As the stack rep from the Central Front Range, could John and you guys loop me in on your discussions? Because I think if we go after it as a bigger group, we may have a little more success.
Absolutely. It's confusing, lots of moving parts. I will make sure John connects with you, hopefully this afternoon.
Sounds great.
Super. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Stone.
And I'm sorry, I had to step out for a couple of important phone calls, but are we on our area reports now?
Yeah, we're closing up the stack, which is 7H. If you have any
No, I don't.
comments there,
Thank you.
but we'll have an opportunity for member entity comments as well. It's coming up. All right. Any last comments on 7H, the stack update? All right, hearing none. Glad that we're going to work with the two regions together. That will be very helpful. We'll be stronger when we work together for sure. Executive Director's report.
Just super briefly, Mr. Chair, just one thing that we're working on, digging into the federal infrastructure bill, the IIJA Act, and I've got a meeting tomorrow with the city, town, and county managers across the region. We had a really good meeting last month. We're trying to figure out how we can build out our grant writing and research and preparation capacity. There's a lot of federal grants that'll be available over the next 5 years in transportation, broadband, water, wastewater infrastructure. So really trying to figure out how we can get aligned and working together on those opportunities. We're building out a website on our PPACG website. Is sort of a portal to push out information on guidance that's been made available so far, notices of funding availability and things like that. So really trying to dig into that and make sure we're ready to go.
Great.
That's
And
all I've
on that note, I just recommend we go big. We really pursue for whatever it's worth. And one of the issues with the county is we always exceed our Tabor cap. So we have trouble asking for grant money from the state because that gets added to our Tabor cap. And we have to defund something else. And it's one of the problems. But this is federal money that we're talking about in this program. And that does not affect Tabor cap. So the county can be very aggressive working with PPACG or what have you about trying to get infrastructure dollars into the community from the federal government. We have these limits on about state, but we don't have those limits about Fed. So, and it's important to us. All right, let's go now to item H, member entity announcements. We just go around the horn, and Commissioner Stone, you wanted to bring something up.
Yeah, actually, we just had a meeting yesterday with representatives from the state co-swap program, which is the new acronym, Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program, which is a multi-million-dollar wildfire mitigation program. Teller County, El Paso County, and I believe a small part of Northeast Park County was included in the target area of this. And I just wanted to bring it up because I think that coordinating between those areas in the proposals, they're asking for 2 proposals from each county or each area, and just coordinating what those requests are so that we aren't unintentionally competing, but rather working in concert to ensure we get the greatest bang out of this mitigation buck. Because what they're saying, $750,000 to minimum $1 million projects. So this is the first really significant opportunity we have to do some wildfire mitigation, and it's happening really fast. April 11th deadline for applications on these. So we're already working on it, sending it to our wildfire council to act as a clearinghouse for this, but wanted to connect with El Paso. And then Dick, I don't know if they've reached out to you or not. There's a part of this that's part of the Upper South Platte. I don't know if they're approaching you as a county or if it's just going to go to CUSP, but wanted to bring it up just so that, again, so we're working in concert.
Great. What's the name of the program again?
COSWAP, which is the Colorado Strategic Wildfire Action Program.
And where are the funds coming from, Eric?
It came out of the legislative action last year, which was bill, I have it pulled up right here. Senate Bill 21-258.
Great. I think your recommendation for us to work together makes a ton of sense. We got a shortened, excuse me, shortened time window. So we got to figure out how to act fast and cooperate.
And one of the partners in this straddles, Colorado Springs Utilities would be a player in this as a partner. So it makes sense even more so because of that to work together.
Right. For whatever it's worth, if that's state money, again, the El Paso County will have a challenge with us continuing to exceed our Tabor limit. But that doesn't mean that that El Paso County can't, is it federal money or is it?
Actually, well, it might be coming through ARPA, but it's coming through the state. But ultimately, though, it is IGAs, so it wouldn't actually, should not affect Tabor.
Okay.
Because it's going to come through as IGAs, working with contractors and partners. So
So the money goes to a different entity as
Correct.
opposed to the counties,
yeah,
and
it does
then
not
they
flow
work
through the
this.
county, but we are
Got it.
the facilitator.
That's super duper. Okay, so we got to figure out how to do that fast and do it together. And Andy, I don't know if you could nug on that for a little bit.
We have a wildfire coordination meeting tomorrow, so I want to make sure we've got the right people coming to that. We'll chat after this meeting to
Okay.
make sure we're roping in who needs to be there.
Yeah, if you'd reach out to Don Angel, our Office of Emergency
Mhm.
Management, he's coordinating with our wildfire council on that.
Excellent. Appreciate the update. Are there any other updates from any other member entities?
I was just going to add on that.
Dick, you've got a hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, on the wildfire part.
Go ahead.
If it's what we saw, a good portion of it is Teller County and El Paso County. I know the Rampart Range in that area. Park County doesn't have as big of a portion because it's just that northeast corner, I believe. And it is money that goes to other people. So there should not be any Tabor issue involved because it'll be a payment to somebody else.
Super. Thank you. All right. Any other comments from any of the member entities? All right. Hearing none. Our next meeting in March is going to be on the 9th at 9 a.m. So just keep that in mind. And seeing no further action, this meeting is concluded. Thank you, everybody, for a great meeting. We had a lot of great discussions, important to get through them. Took us a little time, but we did some great work today. This meeting is adjourned.
Bye, guys.
All right. Take care, everybody.